will be continuing with the live set after 1 p.m. Good morning, and thank you all for joining us for today, the first day that the provincial legislature will do. And we are gathered here to collectively say no to Bill 33 and fund our schools, fund our communities, not policing in schools. Before moving forward, I would like to acknowledge that we are on stolen Indigenous land. And this is across Turtle Island. And recognize that these lands have been and continue to be inhabited by many nations of Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. And the land that we are meeting on today, colonially known as Toronto, are the ancestors of the Credit and the Slavic and the Sony and the Burr ancestors who all call these lands home. Acknowledging as well those who came here involuntarily as a result of the transatlantic enslavement trade. And so we honor and pay tribute to ancestors of African origin and descent. With this stated, it is necessary to move beyond just acknowledgement. This isn't just a checkbox to be marked off, it is Indigenous, Black Afro-Indigenous, Black African diasporic peoples across intersecting identities, whether it be disabled, neurodivergent, queer, and trans, are those who are most negatively impacted by policing, carceral logics, practices, policies, and systems across so-called Ontario, Canada, and globally. And they continue to be systematically denied their humanity and harmed. Shame. Currently, there are multiple bills across the country, including right here in Ontario, that are undermining Indigenous rights, Indigenous self-determination, and self-governance, such as Bill 5. Some immediate calls to action. Follow 8Fire Rising on Instagram and check out their website, 8firerising.ca. As well, follow Okinawa. They are a youth-led movement uniting First Nations youth across so-called Canada. They are taking action, including right here in Ontario. United against Provincial Bill 5 and Federal Bill C5. Again, this is a legislation that is threatening First Nations rights, lands, and futures. It is our duty to learn on ways how to get involved and be in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. Both also have ongoing actions that folks can partake in and support. And it is both our individual and collective responsibility to do so. And just as Bill 33 is anchored by colonial carceral control, as is Bill 5, making this connection from the onset of this teaching and rally and delving us into Bill 5 is Eve Saint. Gender pronoun, she, her, is a Wet'suwet'en land defender. She was at Giddington checkpoint during the RCMP's militarized invasion of unceded territory in 2020, where dozens of unarmed Indigenous people were arrested at gunpoint, which helped spark the Shutdown Canada movement. Eve is a financial divestment campaigner for Giddington checkpoint and a leading organizer in the movement urging RBC to divest from Coastal GasLink and the fossil fuel industry. Eve is a public speaker and based in Toronto, where she cares for her two beautiful small children. Eve?
right. Thank you, Chimigwech. Thank you, everyone, for showing up, and thank you, Andrea, so much and everyone who organized this gathering today. And we're in the time right now where we definitely need to be in solidarity with one another. Yes. Woo! We cannot fight these bills alone. Right now, that their strategy is to flood this country, these provinces with all these bills so that we are unable to fight each one. That is their strategy right now. Shame! Shame! So unity, we need to come together, okay? So with 8th Fire Rising, because I, saw Shut Down Canada, and I saw everyone rise up and be in solidarity with Wet'suwet'en. I saw people just throw down at once. And so when these bills came, all the Indigenous people were upset. And I could see another Shut Down Canada moment 2.0. Woo! And it may come to that. It may come to that. We may not see it right now, but these people, this government, this genocidal government, they have genocidal mindset when it comes to Indigenous people. That's what this land, this government was built on. These laws were built on to genocide my people. And it still continues. Shame. Shame. It still continues till this day. So all across so-called Canada, we see bills. Bills in Nova Scotia. Bills in Quebec. Bills here in Ontario. Bills in the prairies, Alberta, and so-called British Columbia. And Bill C-5, Bill C-2, which may be Bill C-12. Shame. And it's Indigenous lands that are impacted first by these projects, and they will not stop until every project is built. And they took our voice and our power away, but guess what? Shut Down Canada proved that we have the power by showing up with just our bodies, our voices, and our spirit. We shut down this country, and we will again, mark my words, we will again. You will not be pushing through Indigenous lands without our consent. And we need to come together, because in this climate crisis right now, we cannot afford anymore all the projects that they want to push through. Our climate is way too sensitive right now. So we will be calling on our allies, because we are protecting everyone here. Okay, we're protecting the children, everyone's children. You know that the children here in the schools, right? And it's the police. The police, the RCMP, they made a special unit crew to criminalize Indigenous land defenders. Shame, and we are brutalized by this arm of RCMP, by this policing, where we cannot move freely on our lands. Shame. Just recently, Slato, Shay, and Corey just went through the court system and were brutalized by RCMP. And the charges are that they will spend time in jail if they are out on their lands, blocking their lands. They can't even be on their own land. So shame. And so this is the similarities right now, because when I see Bill 33, I give so much to all the people who are organizing against this bill, against policing in these schools, because they police our bodies. These are innocent children just going to school. That's it. Shame. Yes. So keep up the good work. Andrea and everyone else, nationwide, we do gotta fight these bills, and we do have to come together and keep your eyes out. Yes, please, follow 8thfirerising.ca. We are, impacted communities, Indigenous movement leaders, and community leaders that do not want industry in their territories. So, and they have told that they will be shutting it down. So please keep your eyes out, and we are stronger together. We are stronger together. Okay, Chimigwich.
Thank you so much, East for grounding us in the reality that our struggles are interconnected struggles, and that we are stronger in solidarity. Thank you all for joining us at our Policing Free Schools Provincial Campaign Tour finale. Teach-in and rally at Queen's Park. My name is Andrea Vasquez Jimenez, gender pronoun she, her, ella, Director and Principal Consultant of Policing Free Schools. At Policing Free Schools Canada, we are dedicated to catalyzing systemic changes and a paradigm shift towards the co-creation of transformative, healthy, equitable, life-affirming, liberatory, healing-centered, policing-free educational spaces. And this can only be a reality because it is inclusive of a strong, properly funded, supported, and resourced public education system. We work on these systemic issues alongside and in solidarity with our national partners across so-called Canada and international partners across what is known currently as the United States, the United Kingdom, and South Africa. As the issue of policing in schools, the school-prison nexus, and the carceral continuum is a systemic issue and crosses colonial borders. The Provincial Campaign for a Policing Free Schools Ontario is a coalition network of Ontario-based partners, individuals, organizers, and organizations. And at Policing Free Schools, as an organizational lead of the Provincial Campaign for Policing Free Schools Ontario, today we are culminating the Provincial Campaign Tour. The campaign trail consisted of 10 local stops across the province, starting September 9th all the way through to this past Friday, October 17th. This was done so in a span of under 6 weeks, from Ottawa to Peel Region, Halton Region to Dufferin Wellington Guelph, Sudbury in Northern Ontario, Sudbury to Simcoe County, Hamilton, Waterloo Region to York Region, and Elgin, Middlesex, Oxford, London. We co-hosted press conferences alongside our Policing Free Schools, local-based partners across the province, and alongside supporters and community in attendance. And today, on October 20th, the first day that the provincial legislature resumes, we are at Queen's Park for our Provincial Campaign Tour finale. And alongside all of you, we are here to send a clear message from across the province to the Ford government, the Education Minister, Paul Calandra, and his 2 parliamentary assistants, to the Minister of Education, MPP Jess Dixon and MPP Billy Pang. And that is that we unequivocally, collectively say no to Bill 33, no to power grabs, no to taking over school boards, no to the elimination of democratically elected school board trustees, no to policing in schools, and yes to properly funded, supported, and resourced public education. We are demanding. For today's teach-in and rally, we will be hearing from many, including from former students to current students,
educators, trustees, parents and caregivers, community organizers, professors, artists, organization leaders, union leaders, and Ontario New Democratic members of provincial parliament and more, with one uniting message: no to Bill 33, and fund our schools, fund our communities, not policing in schools. Community members who have joined us, there are snacks and beverages right beside our Policing Free Schools Learning booth. Please pick them up. This is through donations of the OSSTF York region. We also have 2 paper campaign petitions. Folks are able to sign them both. These will be retabled by the Ontario New Democrat MPP Kristen Wong-Tam, which were formerly tabled at the legislature by former Ontario New Democratic Jill Andrew. There are also Police in Schools pocketbooks from our national campaign partners, the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association, which they have a national mandate, and those resources were intentionally created as a national resource guide. Also, feel free to grab a lush gift set, as there is also a limited supply. Prior to hearing from more speakers for today, I will start by anchoring us today with an overview of Bill 33, and more so specifically as it relates to the amendments of the Education Act and the current provincial landscape. Bill 33, titled Supporting Children and Students Act, this proposed sweeping legislation, contrary to its name, has nothing to do with supporting students. Instead, Bill 33 is a distraction from the real issue: a chronically underfunded public education system by the Ford Conservative government. Shame! Which, I may add, in 2018, at that time, our public education system was already an underfunded public education system under the Liberals due to the per student funding formula rather than a needs-based funding formula that so many have been advocating for years. Shame. And now, with the Ford Conservative government continuously choosing to make it worse, chronically underfunding by $6.35 billion since 2018, as reported by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Meanwhile, Paul Calandro recently on News Talk 1010 had stated that the funding model had been the same for many, many years, that it's a per student funding model. And they continue to state, if it's not enough, we'll get more. The Minister of Education knows that the education funding is not enough, yet chooses to worsen our public education system. Shame. And Paul Calandra is gaslighting. He is gaslighting all of us, creating his own alternative facts, hoping that people will believe his lies if they hear the same messaging enough times. This too is a distraction from the government's multiple scandals. You name it: Greenbelt, Thermospa, Ontario Place, Skills Development Slush Fund, legal costs for lawsuit losses. Shame! These scandals, to name a few, and corruption are this government's waste of hard-earned taxpayers' dollars in the billions of dollars. And ultimately, their decimation of our public systems and public common goods, such as privatization of healthcare, long-term care, childcare, and more, including the deterioration of our community-based supports. Bill 33 is a distraction from fiscally irresponsible, harmful, and deadly Ford. Bill 33 has everything to do with a power grab, seeking to further centralize provincial government power, this time with the intent to making it easier to take over school boards in pursuit of ending the role of democratically elected school board trustees and towards decimating our public education system. Shame. They are moving towards privatization under the guise of school choice, placing profit over students and towards dismantling school boards as we know it. Shame. Bill 33 has everything to do with concentrating and increasing police power through legislating police decision-making authority over school boards, including democratically elected school officials. It ultimately standardizes policing as a normalized fundamental feature in schooling spaces through mandating policing in schools across the province. Shame. Bill 33 expands policing in schools through tiered and layered policing, regardless of where one is situated in the province. And this gross negligence and human rights violation will ultimately exacerbate harms of school-based policing and entrench the school-prison nexus provincially. And we know that the relentless pursuit of policing in schools is intrinsically connected to the takeover of school boards. For instance, Bill 33 is already being exercised prior to it even becoming legislation, including at boards where they have been taken over, such as the London-based Thames Valley District School Board, who serves students across areas of Elgin, Oxford, Middlesex, and the City of London. Keep in mind that at the moment that the school boards that have been taken over are school boards where their original and initial police and school programs, including SRO programs, in one way or another were removed. There is a direct correlation with takeover of school boards and policing in schools across the province right now. Shame! Bill 33 is a carceral education policy. Bill 33 is about carceral control, and it is about further funneling money into policing and carceral measures and taking money away from education and the well-being of students, educators, workers, and school communities. Shame. Ultimately, Bill 33 is an attack on public education across the province, an attack on democracy, and with it, an attempt to systematically silence students, parents, caregivers, guardians, and communities across the province. Shame! Bill 33 is the means to the end of having any form of government accountability and is expanding unilateral provincial government power, hiding away from public scrutiny to expedite what they already have planned to do, and indeed what has already been underway. Chronically underfund, defund, distract, dismantle, privatize, and profit. No matter how many children, students, workers, families, and school communities get hurt, the Doug Ford government has already made their choice. They choose to wastefully pour millions of tax dollars into non-evidence-based and fiscally irresponsible and harmful measures of policing in schools through the Ministry of Solicitor General's Community Safety and Policing Grant. And that this education system has already been plummeting millions of dollars into technological surveillance across schooling spaces. Students' learning conditions are workers' working conditions. And rather than addressing the root causes, the systemic chronic underfunding of education, alongside addressing social and structural determinants of health and equity, which includes a strong public education system, the Ford government chooses to siphon funds out of our schools and communities. Shame. The government knows that they cannot police their way into school safety, student safety, or student academic achievement. As for the relationship building narrative that keeps continuously being parroted by the education minister, the ministry spokesperson, the press secretary for Ontario's Minister of Education, continuously saying that police and school programs, and I quote, help foster positive relationships between students and law enforcement, ultimately making Ontario schools safer, end quote. This is disinformation. The government is choosing to spew disinformation. The narrative that they weaponize is intellectually disingenuous and a misleading, harmful narrative that has already been debunked by Ontario-based Gita Madan and University of Alberta Faculty of Education Professor Alexander Da Costa. We know the impact of policing in schools. The research is clear when it comes to the systemic issue of policing in schools, as is clear student testimonials from former students and current students and people's lived and living experiences. And that is that policing does not make educational spaces safer. Policing does not prevent or reduce the manufactured crisis of violence in our educational spaces. Policing has harmful impacts on students, including on student achievement, educational outcomes, and student well-being. I want to make it clear as well that as school boards across the province, including even those who had removed or paused their original and initial police and school programs, some of those have opted for a reformist approach and have continuously maintained policing in schools under different means and under different names. That is why Bill 33 is not about the return or reintroduction of police in schools provincially. Provincially, it is about mandating and the expansion of policing in schools, including but not limited to the SRO program, as there are dozens of names of police in school programs and policing in schools, including police-led programs across the province. And I want to make it clear, the reality is that one cannot reform policing in schools out of its systemic harms. And we've already seen what happens across the country when reforms, revisions, reimagining, transforming, strengthening, evolving, updating, new approach, relaunching, revamping, redesigning, refreshing. We've heard of all of the names. When revisions to police and school programs takes place, when rebranding happens, when renaming happens, when changing the composition of police and school programs, such as diversifying officers or more training as a means to have access to schools and students, or further specifying the purpose, roles, and responsibilities of police and school programs. That is that the harms remain intact and harms are replicated and perpetuated, as this is a systemic issue. Again, it is not possible to reform one ways out of these harms regardless of intent. It is fundamentally a no to all forms of policing in schools, including police and school programs, regardless of the name they go by, and its reforms, wherever they may be across the province and elsewhere. And we are in solidarity with those across the country where the creation of mandated policing in schools has already happened, including in BC. Meanwhile, police budgets continue to balloon, including under the rationale for the need to maintain or to expand policing in schools. Funding is siphoned out of what actually would co-create thriving and healthy schools and communities which in and of themselves are safe. Bill 33 is not a surprise to us. It was indeed solely a matter of time. As this bill, again, is in alignment with Ford's ongoing track record. Their track record and fixation on colonial carceral control, anchored by punishment, harm, and waste of taxpayers' dollars. Bill 33 is reflective and interconnected with so many other actions and legislation right here in Ontario. And we still, to this date, see the continuation of this. On the heels of Bill 33, the Government of Ontario launched a province-wide initiative in collaboration with multiple policing associations. They launched a coordinated Answer the Call PR marketing campaign to increase diversified policing across the province. And the Education Minister sees school grounds as a recruitment ground. Shame. This is along with the recent announcement of the expansion of police training sites, while simultaneously post-secondary campuses are closing down due to systemic chronic underfunding. Meanwhile, the Ford government has already announced almost $200 million into increasing jail beds. We're already working to significantly expand Ontario's jailing through infrastructure, several infrastructure projects towards an Ontario prison expansion. Shame. Equitable access to education is a human right, and policing in schools, including police in school programs, impedes this access. It is overdue for the Ford government and the Minister of Education to face the facts and support students through properly funding and resourcing schools, not policing in schools. Fund our schools, fund our communities, not policing in schools. Our next speaker will be delving into Bill 33 with a particular focus on the proposed changes in the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities Act and the detrimental impacts of post-secondary campuses, students and workers. Because we are here in opposition to the totality of Bill 33. Cyrielle Nejalica, gender pronoun she, her, is the chairperson of the Canadian Federation Students of Ontario. She advocates for the amplification of Black and Francophone voices and for the recognition of students and student unions' autonomy. She firmly believes that a free and accessible post-secondary education system is possible and will continue to work towards it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cyrielle Geleka, and I am the chairperson of the Canadian Federation of Students Ontario, the oldest and largest student organization in the province, representing over 350,000 students across 35 different member locals. We're standing here today on the first day the legislation returns, not to politely ask, but to deliver one final message to Queen's Park. Students have spoken and have had enough. This is the government's last chance to listen. Bill 33 is on the table, and its intent is crystal clear. This is a full frontal attack on students, workers, and communities. It's a dangerous consolidation of power that strikes at the very core of public education in this province. Bill 33 follows the same playbook post-secondary students have seen for decades. The Student Choice Initiative, which targeted vital student and campus services and organizations, the slashing of OSAP, the exploitation of international students, the defunding of research, and the surveillance of our campuses. And each time, without fail, the issues at hand are a direct result of the crisis manufactured by the government. On the other hand, Bill 33 hands sweeping powers to the Minister of Education, allowing the government to override elected trustees, silence school boards and reshape education without consent. Shame. Bill 33 is not about solutions. It's about control. Now, they're targeting ancillary fees, the very fees that make life-giving services possible on our campuses. Students pay thousands in tuition each year, and that is what makes education expensive. Ancillary fees are what make education survivable. They fund student unions, mental health services, food centers, sexual violence support centers, services that exist only because this government refuses to fund education adequately. And it doesn't stop there. Their language around merit-based admissions undermines the principles of access and equity. It disregards systemic barriers and opens up doors to bias, exclusion, and privatization. Merit, when defined by the powerful, becomes a tool for gatekeeping, not opportunity. They are commodifying research, treating our academic work as intellectual property to be bought and sold. Research is for the public good, not for corporations to manipulate into making more profit for themselves. Graduate students are some of the lowest paid people on our campuses, collecting stipends that don't even meet minimum wage. Shame. No amount of government interference would fix that. The minister's control of research attacks academic independence and puts Ontario's world-class research reputation at risk. The government has overplayed its hand. Our futures are not to be gambled with. Right now, inside Queen's Park, decisions are being made. The very fate of our education system is lying in the hands of every elected official in the province. And the people, students, workers, and communities have already spoken. Students across campuses have just started a province-wide week of action. Thousands are mobilizing in every corner of Ontario to demand that this government keep their hands off our education. Post-secondary campus are some of the last democratic spaces we have left, where we mobilize, where we organize and dream of something bigger. But this bill is coming for all of us. Ontario's public education system does not belong to Queen's Park. It belongs to us. Ontario's public education system doesn't belong to Queen's Park. It belongs to us. We learn from it, we teach in it, and we fight for it. And we will not sit back while the government tears it apart from the inside out. We've seen it before. They say it's about accountability, but it's really about censorship. They say it's about safety, but it's really about more cups and more cuts. They say it's about giving students a voice, but they silence every one of our demands. We refuse to let education become a commodity. We refuse to let politicians who've never walked our halls dictate what learning looks like. The government has spent years gutting public education, but this time we will not be ignored. So to Nolan Quinn, Paul Calandra, Michael Parsa, Doug Ford, and every single MPP inside of Queen's Park, this is your last chance. The government is out of time. Students, workers, and communities are rising, and we will never go down without a fight. We have organized and won before, and we will do it again. No to policing our schools, no to infringement on autonomy, and no to Bill 33. The public sector is not the government's to take. Thank you. I'm gonna end us off with a little chant. I'm gonna say, if the students don't get it, and you're gonna apply, shut it down.
Our next speaker will be delving into Bill 33 with a focus on the proposed changes in the Child, Youth, and Family Services Act. Again, because here we are in solidarity in opposition to the totality of Bill 33. Particularly focusing on how it exacerbates systemic harms of the child and family policing systems and does not address what has been demanded for decades. Tyla Dixon, gender pronouns they, she, is a mixed Black queer artist and child welfare survivor, and the executive lead of the Collective of Child Welfare Survivors. With over a decade of systemic advocacy and community organizing, Tyla works to create survivor-led, trauma-informed, healing-centered networks rooted in transformative justice and Black liberation. Tyla?
And good morning to everyone here. I appreciate all those who are able to attend today's rally. A big shout out to our comrades, Policing Free Schools, who have been diligent in protecting our children and youth and community members, in fighting and advocating for safer school environments. I come to you today wearing many hats, a representative of the Collective of Child Welfare Survivors, a survivor of the child welfare and family policing system, a person who has navigated forced criminality, and as a former student who experienced policing within the schools and systemic neglect of my safety and education. I speak not only from firsthand experience of how these systems fail to care for the students they claim to serve, but also as someone working within community to respond to the needs of Black child welfare survivors and their families who are deeply impacted by policing systems. To be clear, I share my personal experience because it legitimizes my place in this work, not as a performance piece for actors within these systems. I'm here to let my people, my community know that we can take up space. I use my voice to give power to my kin who cannot stand here, those facing carcerality, housing, and financial precarity, and as is too often the case, those who are no longer with us, but who have shaped my politics and continue to fuel and inspire me. I also speak for the children and youth who continue to be ignored despite their bravery and advocating for themselves and speaking their truth, only to be dismissed or silenced by the very systems that claim to protect them. Despite the deep grief I carry, I know that a better world is possible if we would only truly begin to hear, if they would truly begin to hear us. I hope to continue honoring them through my messaging and through this work. As I stand here today, there are Black youth in schools who are navigating the weight of an anti-Black carceral and colonial education system. Black youth and child welfare survivors in our community continue to share their experiences of anti-Black bullying within systems where administrations often legitimize this harm, dismissing, minimizing, or gaslighting students who speak up. When Black youth engage in self-advocacy or respond to defense of themselves, they are too often met with harsh consequences, from suspensions to police involvement. These experiences reveal how anti-Blackness in schools extends beyond peer interactions. It is embedded in the very institutions meant to protect students. School administrations frequently weaponize their authority, drawing on carceral systems like family policing and the judicial system to punish rather than to support Black students. This is what we mean when we speak of the school-prison nexus, the way schools reproduce and reinforce carceral logics instead of fostering safety, care, and accountability. Shame. Anecdotally, having been in a school with a police officer present, I did not feel safer. In fact, it contributed to a constant sense of surveillance. At the time, I was living in a group home that replicated jail and prison structures and that frequently deployed police as a form of behavioral management. This normalized policing as a response to everyday challenges and transitioned me into criminalization that would follow me for many years. Rather than serving as a sanctuary from the conditions I was living in, the school reinforced them. There was no escape, no space for me to engage in learning in meaningful capacity, which ultimately led to my disengagement from education for many years, a shared experience among many other Black child welfare survivors. There are brilliant children and youth today living in similarly precarious circumstances who are not being mentored, supported, or guided to build on their strengths. Our institutions continue to create conditions where young people are trapped in cycles of survival. Learning cannot happen when our bodies know we are not safe. This bill fails to address the deep underlying issues that these youth are facing. Instead, it reinforces them through colonial, capitalistic, and carceral tactics that will continue to cause them harm. At its best, Bill 33 is an indication of an administration that is deeply out of touch with the needs of our communities And at worst, more accurately, it is an intentional act of diverting resources away from what would actually create safer learning environments in order to reinforce a system of anti-Black violence that keeps marginalized communities trapped within this nexus. What our elected officials should be prioritizing is meeting the needs outlined by students and caregivers, approaches rooted in trauma-informed practices, transformative processes, and the allocation of resources towards adequately trained staff and smaller classrooms. We need increased mental health supports for students, particularly services that are culturally responsive to the needs and Black and marginalized communities, as well as robust accessibility supports. We need to recognize that this is a broader societal issue. People in our communities are experiencing financial and housing precarity because basic needs have been commodified to grow the wealth of large corporations and individuals only interested in profit. A shame. Allowing for the privatization of school systems will only further ostracize vulnerable communities, perpetuating cycles of disenfranchisement. We must maintain structures that allow communities to hold educational institutions accountable. As the bill relates to child welfare, or what we call family policing, there is nothing that feels truly meaningful in this legislative change. The Ford government dismantled one of the only independent bodies advocating for the rights of children and youth in care, the Provincial Child Advocate's Office. It's shame. Its removal was strongly opposed not only by service providers, but also children and youth, former Crown wards, and child welfare survivors, including my organization, which was founded in direct response to that decision. Investing in additional bureaucratic oversights or limited information sharing mechanisms only further adultifies children while stripping away their sense of agency and autonomy. These changes also fail to acknowledge that when children age out of care, they become adults who remain under-resourced and under-supported. Many must now navigate trauma from institutionalization and abuse while facing an inadequate and inaccessible society that does not meet their needs. The Ombudsman's office, while positioned as an accountability mechanism, is often inaccessible to young people. Its complaint process can create bureaucratic disillusionment by placing the labor and the emotional weight to those who are already in crisis. A complaint does not prevent harm, it only documents it. These processes do not address immediate needs like hunger, housing insecurity, or substance use rooted in over-medication within the care system. For years, youth have done the work for calling for legislative changes that would actually support children and youth in care. Many of them are no longer here with us today because of the lack of care in this society. Their lives informed policy, and their absence is a testament to the urgency of this fight. Again, what we need is more resources to community-rooted, driven support, one that is informed by the needs and the people who are impacted. Thank you.
Fund our schools, fund our communities, not policing in schools. Again, Bill 33 is a proposed wide sweeping legislation which impacts multiple pieces of legislation. And we are here in solidarity in opposition to the whole totality of Bill 33. Our next speaker will be delving into the totality of Bill 33. Harini Sivalingam, gender pronouns she, her, is a lawyer, academic, and community organizer. She is currently the director of the Equality Program at the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, CCLA, and oversees and executes advocacy strategies around equality issues that impact marginalized individuals and groups across Canada. Harini?
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Harini Sivalinga. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the director of the Equality Program at the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. For over 60 years, the CCLA has been defending rights and freedoms for all of us across Canada. Today, I want to speak about Bill 33 and the serious civil liberties implications of this bill. Bill 33 threatens to make our schools places where civil liberties are put at risk in three deeply concerning ways. First, First, when considering admissions in post-secondary institutions, Bill 33 imposes a restrictive, one-size-all-fits approach to admissions that infringes the autonomy of post-secondary institutions to choose students, undermines equal access to post-secondary education, and risks violating Ontario's own human rights laws. The proposed restrictions undermine holistic, equity-based admissions approaches that consider a wide range of applicant qualities and diminishes opportunities for historically underrepresented and marginalized groups. Such an admissions process does nothing to improve the life chances of those who come from marginalized communities, while at the same time privileging students from wealthier backgrounds or those who have access to additional social support. The outcome will be further entrenching systemic inequalities in our public post-secondary institutions. Admissions to publicly funded advanced education should be a pathway that's open to all students and not an unfair contest that privileges some while excluding others. Second, the bill mandates police presence in schools, a move that raises serious concerns around privacy, community agency, and deepening social inequalities. Schools should be spaces of learning and support. The best chances for student success should not be compromised by perceived benefit of increased surveillance and surreptitious intelligence gathering that can disproportionately impact and target racialized and marginalized students. By making police involvement in schools mandatory, the bill strips school boards and communities to make decisions based on evidence-based safety strategies. This top-down approach prioritizes enforcement over inclusion, care, and student well-being. This alarming measure is also a lack of adequate engagement of students, parents, educators, and community organizations. Particularly, sorry, let me just start over. Okay. Schools should be spaces of learning and support. The best chances for student success should not be compromised by the perceived benefit of increased surveillance and surreptitious intelligence gathering. This top-down approach prioritizes enforcement over inclusion, care, and student well-being. This alarming measure is also a lack of adequate engagement of students, parents, educators, and community organizations, particularly those from racialized and marginalized communities who are most affected by. You've heard already from many of those voices, and this afternoon you will hear from many more. And ignoring these voices undermines public trust and ignores the well-documented harm and disproportionate impact of law enforcement on Black, Indigenous, and other marginalized youth. Finally, the overly broad provisions of Bill 33 allow the removal of locally elected school trustees, eroding accountability and democratic oversight. The bill provides the province with sweeping powers to take over locally elected school boards under vaguely defined matters of public interest. Local trustees serve as a crucial bridge between communities and schools, representing local values and needs. Centralizing power in this way diminishes transparency and takes away communities' voices in decisions that affect students' education. Together, these measures in Bill 33 raise serious concerns about fairness, equality, privacy, democratic accountability, and government overreach. Ontario students, parents, communities deserve better policies that respect these values. Bill 33 does the opposite. It risks turning schools into areas of exclusion, surveillance, and top-down control by government. Civil liberties of students are not optional. They are fundamental on the foundation of a just and inclusive society. And to that we say no to Bill 33 in its totality. Thank you.
Fund our schools, fund our communities, not policing in schools. So we're going to be moving over to some artistic expressions because art is political. And this time around, it's going to be with Spin el Poeta, who's going to be grounding us, really looking at the broader and interconnected social-political landscape, highlighting the manufactured police crisis and the impact on each individual student. And with the support of the League of Canadian Poets and Canada Council for the Arts, I want to introduce Spin el Poeta, gender pronouns he, him, is an award-winning Guatemalan spoken word artist and slam poetry champ on national, provincial, and municipal levels. He is a longtime youth advocate, arts educator, former refugee, and proprietor of the One Mic Educators Arts Enterprise and co-founder of the One Mic Educators Open Mic Collective. Spin.
Strong round of applause, please, for all the youth that are here today. If, like me, you've come to protest all the 50,000 different things going wrong in this country, we don't always see the youth that we have out there. So I love all you that are here. A round of applause for all the Kufias that are here as well, please. Free Palestine. As mentioned in my introduction, I am an arts educator. I also work with youth that are incarcerated or in conflict with the law to provide them community service hours, working on reducing the recidivism. Part of it involves also immigrant indigenous friendship and getting them out to indigenous territory to support elders and get their hours in the process while also respecting the original caretakers of this land. So it is an honor to be here. And I have a poem called One RIP is One Too Many, because everything is interconnected. Society saw him as a thug with tattoos and criminal charges. To me, he was a king down by a slug, tired of living on minimal margins. Brilliant mind, family oriented. Now, just a ticker at the bottom of the news screen, not even worth the main story. You see, to the media, he was just another kid in the hood, lost to the violence of drugs and poverty, the most malignant form of cancer. Gun violence is a social determinant of health that must be woven into policy and resourced accordingly, but people only seek answers when this hits the news. Society's confused. A black and brown life is worth less than a white one when the media says so. They show news clips on repeat from the few places they go. Quick to get out the way, though, of the stories about success in the hood. Quick to get out the way, though, of the stories about redemption in the hood. Quick to get out the way, though, of the stories about anything good in the hood. And half of these activist groups talking about the proletariat ain't doing a damn thing in the hood. I constantly worry for the youth that I serve. Even young queens far removed from a life of crime have had to swerve out of the way of the path of a bullet. Expelled from a gun with a trigger pulled by a finger connected to the hand of the shooter that pulled it. A shooter with a story all of his own. Some shooters I worry are youth that I've known grown into the politics of hoods where the older heads are in their mid-20s. The kids are out of control, and I mean it just as I said it. Streets got them hustling at 10 years old. Where are the funders to resource their mentors? Who's there for them and their underpaid mentors when their mother's at work? You think police can solve this problem? Our whole city's heart has gone numb. That mother's working, paying market rent, over $1,500 a month, living in social housing. How does this work? She's trapped in that housing, hollering when her son's life is cut short. But all society does is blame the mother or the victim. So sickening how quick people are to emit an uninformed opinion about this and spit venom towards the mother. Now flip the script. What would you do? For the more that you work, the more rent you have to fork up to a housing provider that doesn't maintain your unit. What would you do? For in spite of the violence, this neighborhood is all that you knew. What would you do? You're desperate to leave but don't have the money to go. What would you do? You think everyone trapped in poverty wants to dance with the devil? I've seen so many people suffering in silence, doing the best that they can to cope with the violence. And that brother that society saw as a thug with criminal charges, he's gone. I can't even lie to you, more will follow. It's hard to take the stick out of a youth's hand when his heart's gone hollow, and that's the only source of protection he has. What's he gonna do, call the cops? That mentor might be the only hope he has left. So never give up on our youth, not even in death. And don't ever forget, one of the world's greatest leaders found his calling in prison. So when these youth get locked up, walk with this wisdom. Malcolm X, El Haj Malik El Shabazz used to be Malcolm Little, a great revolutionary once labeled a thug with jail time in the middle.
Fund our schools, fund our communities, not policing in schools. Up next, we're going to have some Mudna protest choir. We are just going to be taking a couple of minutes for setup. Again, is political. We've heard the messaging that grounds us in our core message. Got the message from Spin El Poeta around how our struggles are interconnected. And so we're here in opposition to Bill 33 and understand fundamentally, as Audre Lorde says, there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. And up next, an anchoring for each and every one of us to imagine properly funded, supported, and resourced public education where there was actually political will and moral clarity to address the root issues, and our deep knowing that this is possible and practical. Jen Shan, gender pronoun she, her, is a second generation Chinese Canadian settler. She is the CEO of the Department of Imaginary Affairs, whose work is to imagine equitable futures and do everything we can to bring them into reality. We believe collective liberation is possible, that when we dismantle systems of oppression. Jen Shan?
Okay. A few weekends ago, I was pulled over by the police for the first time. I was on my way to facilitate a youth education workshop in Jane and Finch, and my first thought was, what did I do wrong? And my second thought was to take the keffiyeh off. I didn't want to give the officer any reason to get agitated. Turns out my license plate was expired. I got a ticket. I drove away. If my kids had been in the car with me at the time, I would have had to explain to them that I just made myself smaller, quieter, more compliant to avoid being a target. The same way I have to explain to them why there are police at protests and who exactly are they there to protect. When have you made yourself smaller around police? What did that cost you? And if you've never had to, imagine what it means that others do every single day, that children do this. It's easy for a lack of experience to keep you from really knowing what is happening for others. For me, after George Floyd was murdered, my perspective shifted as a mom. Another mom in my mom group, the only mom to Black children, shared with us how she was already teaching her 4-year-old son how to act when police were around to ensure that they came home safely. She was already teaching them to be smaller to ensure their safety. It was at that moment that I realized that I needed to be having these conversations with my own children so that it is not only the Black children that have to bear this burden, and our Indigenous children and our trans children. My privilege means assuming that if my children were in trouble at school, I'd get a phone call at home. It means never thinking that my children would be shot for playing with a toy gun in a playground. Tamara Rice was 12 years old. We already know that police presence costs us, and we know that our efforts to mandate and expand policing into our schools creates a school-prison nexus where Black, Brown, Indigenous children are criminalized for behavior that gets privileged children a conversation. Children making themselves smaller in a place that should let them make mistakes and grow. Safety comes from being able to learn from your mistakes and be accountable for your actions. That gets cut short when it's replaced with punishment and shame. Our imagination has already been policed. We've been taught that the future is predetermined, out of our control. Colonization, racism, capitalism have trapped us in a limited version of hope and stolen our ability to imagine dismantling them. These systems are deliberately confusing, constantly changing. Through complicated bills like Bill 33, they launch multiple simultaneous attacks, hoping we can't imagine stopping them all. But they can't steal our imagination. Because imagination isn't escapism. When we imagine different futures, our bodies respond. Imagination is a rehearsal for reality. It's how we build muscle memory for a world we haven't lived in yet. Some people might believe that policing creates safety. But if we believe that safety comes from relationships and connections, we need to come together as parents and community who want safety to be a part of the solution to making schools safer. This is an invitation to all community and all parents to make schools safer. So imagine with me. Imagine schools where safety comes from the people who are already there. Teachers with time to build relationships where children can make mistakes and learn from them. Counselors and mental health workers in every building. Peer support programs, restorative practices that see conflict as an opportunity to build trust. Imagine communities with abundant supports, housing, food security, healthcare, strong public systems that means our families aren't in crisis. Imagine political will that divests from policing and reallocates those resources into places that actually keep us safe. Not surveillance, not punishment, but care, connection, conditions where we can all thrive. These systems exist, they're being built right now. They're harder to access because of racism, because of systems designed for control, but harder doesn't mean impossible. Now imagine what you can do today that ripples outward. Imagine you ask your teacher, what supports do you need? Then organize with other families to demand those supports, to make sure that they have what they need so they can focus on making connections with our children. Imagine you listen, like really listen, to parents whose stories differ from yours, to families harmed by police presence in schools. Then use your privilege, your voice, your access to amplify what they've been saying all along. Imagine you keep showing up to conversations in the schoolyard, to hard conversations at your dinner table about what safety actually means. Every small action is practice. Every conversation is a rehearsal. Every time we choose community over control, we make that choice easier for the next person. The same people forcing our government to acknowledge complicity in genocide are the same people who have power that we can use to keep policing out of our schools. It's you. It's hard to see what our protests, our letters, our calls do to stop genocide, but we have to keep believing it matters. We are disrupting the narrative that no one will notice and that no one will hold them accountable. Palestine feels far away from here, but we know we can make an impact with our schools because the opportunity is at every drop-off, every pickup, at the dining room table, when we tuck our kids home at night. This is where we have power. I know this is hard. Building real safety is harder than accepting easy answers, but we can do it together. Let's see other perspectives. Let's expand beyond what we know. Let's act on what we imagine is possible. We need schools to be places we trust, places where kids can make mistakes and learn from them. We build that through care, not control, through relationships, not surveillance, through investing in people, not punishment. Policing free schools aren't a dream, they're a demand. They're what collective liberation looks like. It starts with us refusing to let privilege determine policy and to harm our schools. It continues with the regular practice of imagining alternatives and then making what we imagine real. Where will you start? Who will you talk to? Where will you show up? Our schools, our children, all of them, today and in the future, depend on us. Thank you.
also ground us that education labor unions are here in solidarity with us. We are in this fight together, because when we fight, we win. Up next, we have David Maston, gender pronouns he, him, elected ETFO, Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario President in 2025. After representing ETFO members since 2002, he was elected to the provincial executive in 2013 as vice president in 2019 and first vice president in 2021. With public education, equity, and workers' rights under threat, he knows our greatest strength lies in unity, action, and hope. David?
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is David Maston, he, him pronouns. I'm here on behalf of 84,000 public elementary teachers that work in every corner of this province, teaching our youngest learners. I'm here with my sister, Shirley Bell, first vice president, and we are so proud to stand with you today. We are here today to say no to Bill 33 and no to a government that thinks policing our children is a substitute for supporting them. One of the most troubling pieces of Bill 33 is the renewed push to bring back police into our schools. We know what this means. We've heard from students themselves, especially Black, Indigenous, racialized, Muslim, and 2S LGBTQ+ youth, who said that the presence of police made them feel less safe. They made them feel watched, not welcomed, punished, not protected. That's why years ago, many communities and school boards across Ontario took action. In 2017, the Toronto District School Board ended its school resource officer program after students shared stories of fear and surveillance. In 2020, Hamilton Wentworth District School Board listened to their community and did the same. In 2021, Waterloo Region District School Board followed suit after hearing from racialized and 2S LGBTQ+ students who said police presence made them feel unsafe. These were local democratic decisions rooted in consultation, community leadership, and care for students. But Bill 33 would erase that authority, imposing a one-size-fits-all directive from Queen's Park, ignoring the lived experiences of students and educators who have already said no. Bill 33 undermines local democracy. By granting the minister sweeping powers to intervene in school boards under the vague notion of public interest, it sidelines democratically elected trustees. Silencing these voices means silencing communities and concentrating power in one office. Despite what Premier Ford and Minister Calandra might say, we know that public education will not be improved by policing students, silencing trustees, and disempowering educators. What our students need is smaller classes, more educational assistance, more counselors, more mental health supports that actually meet their needs. They need more caring adults in their schools who see them and who listen to them and who help them thrive, not uniformed officers who remind them that they are under suspicion. Bringing back police will not make schools safer. It will make many students feel less safe, less welcome, and less able to learn. We cannot claim to value equity while reintroducing practices that traumatize the very students our system has already failed to protect. ETFO members stand with students, stand with parents, and stand with communities who have fought for policing-free schools. We stand for equity, inclusion, and local democracy. And we will not allow this government to roll back the progress that many have worked for. So today, as we raise our voices against Bill 33, we say no to policing our students, no to silencing our communities, yes to investment, not intimidation. and yes to inclusive public education that lifts every child and values every educator. Thank you.
Into an overview of children's rights, connecting it to the rights violations through Bill 33. Kathy Ann Murray, gender pronouns she, her, is a master's student in criminology and a child and youth advocate representing Defense for Children International Canada. She is committed to dismantling anti-Black racism within institutions and advancing systemic change to create safer, more equitable futures for children and youth. Kathy Ann Murray.
Good morning, everyone. How are you guys feeling? You warm enough? Okay. I want to start off with a quote by Nelson Mandela. There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. We cannot build safe schools through fear and surveillance. We build safety through rights, care, and community. So my name is Kathy Ann Murray, and I am here today as a representative of Defense of Children International Canada, and as a graduate student in criminology who studies the impact of systems on young people, along with my peer, Ashu Kitu, who's here as well. But I am also here as someone who comes from a community that has lived the consequences of racial profiling, over-policing, and systematic injustice. I, too, have a younger brother who went to a school where police officers were present, not because he was violent, not because he was unsafe, but because society has been conditioned to view young Black boys as threats before they are seen as children. Shame. He was pulled aside more than once for random questioning. He was watched more closely, disciplined more harshly, and made to feel like he didn't belong in a place that was supposed to be his second home. This is not safety, this is surveillance. This is not policing, not protection. And that is exactly what Bill 33 threatens to expand across Ontario. Schools with police are 38% more likely to suspend students and 3 times more likely to refer children to law enforcement, even for minor, non-violent behaviors. And the students most targeted, Black youth, Indigenous youth, students with disabilities, and youth in care. We know this, we live this. So let's be clear, this is not a safety bill, it is a control bill. And beyond being harmful, Bill 33 violates children's rights under international law. Canada has ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and all policy affecting children must reflect its core principles. Affecting children must reflect their core principles. Bill 33 violates all 4 of them, starting with Article 2, non-discrimination. Every child has the right to equal treatment, but we know policing does not impact children equally. In Toronto, Black students are 7.5 times more likely to be stopped by police even when doing nothing wrong. Shame. Bill 33 would intensify racial inequality. Article 2, violated. Let's look at Article 3. Best interests of the child. Decisions must be made in the best interests of children, but no child benefits from being treated like a criminal inside a school. Bill 33 was written without credible evidence of positive outcomes for children. Article 3, violated. Shame. Let's look at Article 6, life, survival, and development. Children have the right to grow, learn, and develop in safe environments. Fear-based learning destroys development and contributes to school push-out.
Over-policing does not nurture development. Article 6, violated. Article 12, right to be heard. Children and youth must be meaningfully consulted on decisions that affect them. Yet not one youth-led consultation shaped Bill 33. Youth were spoken for, not spoken with. Article 12, violated. Shame. So today I stand before you to say we do not accept this. Safety is a human right, but policing is not care and fear is not safety. Schools should be places of support with counselors, not cops. Youth workers, not armed responses. Community partnerships, not surveillance. So on behalf of DCI Canada, we affirm that any policy concerning children must be rooted in children's rights. Instead of investing in policing, we call on government leaders to invest in mental health supports, after-school programs, restorative justice initiatives, educational equity, and youth voice. Real safety doesn't come from handcuffs in hallways. It comes from belonging. It comes from representation. It comes from trust. Bill 33 must be recognized for what it is: a betrayal of our commitments to children and a threat to justice. We cannot claim to uphold democracy while silencing youth. We cannot claim to value safety while criminalizing children. And we cannot claim to stand for human rights while violating the UNCRC in our own schools. Let today send a message: we will not allow fear to govern our classrooms. We will not normalize criminalization, and we will not abandon the rights of children, because children's rights are human rights and they are non-negotiable. Thank you.
Into what is actually needed, including the centering of transformative justice and restorative justice, not punishment and harm. Gabby Aquino, gender pronoun she, her, is a youth justice and advocacy manager at Peace Builders International Canada, a Toronto-based nonprofit organization that focuses on enhancing access to justice for young people in youth justice and education, using restorative justice and practices through prevention, intervention, and capacity building. Gabby?
Morning, everyone. How are y'all doing? Sorry, I'm a little old school, so I wrote out my notes on paper. But I did want to start off by saying thank you to the organizers and everyone who has made today possible, and the long legacy of efforts, many of which have been led by youth, families, parents, and communities themselves, that have made today and the journey to today possible. So as Andrea shared, I work at Peace Builders Canada, and a lot of the work that we do at the heart of it is about enhancing access to justice for all young people, including Black and racialized young people, in the education and youth justice systems. And so one of our cornerstone programs is our restorative schools programs. And what that includes is training on restorative practices, on restorative justice for teachers, for educators, for other school staff, so that they're equipped to deal with and navigate conflict in different ways, so that they're able to provide safer learning environments for students and our young people in different ways. We also offer classroom circles, and this is where we're trying to empower, trying to build up young people, make sure that they have the confidence, the support, a stronger sense of identity and a sense of self, so that they can live healthier lifestyles, build and sustain healthy relationships, and move in the world in very supported ways. And then finally, the last thing I want to touch on is the conflict resolution support that we also offer, where further intervention may be needed. And this is where we're directly using restorative practices to address relationship breakdowns, harm that's happened, conflict, or any other disruptions. And a lot of the work that we do is about recognizing the importance and the possibilities of restorative justice. Restorative justice recognizes the repair of harm, of conflict, of relationship breakdown as a shared collective responsibility. That means it creates space for everyone to be involved, from the people who have caused harm to the people who've been harmed, to their respective support systems, and everyone else in between. It's about working together to get to outcomes through processes that benefit all of us, because that is possible. It's also about recognizing the diverse, the vast, the rich, the complex contexts and relationships that we all come from, and how those things can directly impact our needs, our lived experiences, our histories, our futures, our relationships. It's about understanding that if we don't address the root causes of what causes conflict, what causes relationship breakdown, what can lead to harm, then there's a lot that we're losing. And so what restorative justice and restorative practices offer us are timelines that are not fixed. They don't just focus on the immediate conflict. They also look at what's needed in the long term and what's needed at the outset to prevent us from getting into situations that involve or that look harmful to people. It's also about providing more context-specific, culturally significant, diversified, holistic, communal, and relational outcomes and processes that are more beneficial than this sort of one-size-fits-all, top-down approach that we often see in punitive models. And so by extension, restorative justice is not only possible, but it's cost-effective. It's meaningful, it's ethical, it's culturally significant. It creates alternatives that are worth exploring, especially when we're talking about young people. It forces us to recognize that everyone has a stake in community safety, and that community and how we define it has to include everybody. Otherwise, we leave people behind, and we see the effects that that can have, especially on communities who have historically and continue to be left behind. And so what restorative justice teaches us, what it embodies, what it tells us, is that justice, accountability, safety, community are all things that are interconnected. They are not, and they cannot be mutually exclusive. And when we're talking about young people, and we're talking about restorative justice, and we're talking about these other futures and possibilities, we're especially reminded that it truly takes a village to raise a child. But it's important for those villages to be healthy, to be supported, to be listened to. And so while it's important for us to use these more restorative frameworks, we also need to make sure that we're investing in communities, that we're investing in schools, and that we're ensuring that they have the space, the resources, and the support to pursue restorative justice, to ensure that young people have the safe learning environments, the safe communities that they're all entitled to. So let's make sure that we're supporting the villages so that we can support children, that we can support our young people, and the futures, their well-being, and the generations to come. Thank you so much.
The speakers is Julia Galloway. Shortly, we are going to be having 3 members of provincial parliament joining us. Two of them from the Ontario New Democratic Party. One of them, Chandra Pasma, who is the MPP for Ottawa West, Nepean, since 2022. She had defeated a PC incumbent, a parent and former policy researcher. She serves as Deputy Health Leader and Shadow Minister of Education. And she is a champion of smaller class sizes, better funding, and safe schools, while holding the government accountable for cuts and advocating for stronger public services. We're also going to be joined by MPP Kristen Wong-Tam, gender pronouns they, them, is a member of Provincial Parliament for Toronto Centre, and member of the official opposition Ontario NDP. They are the Shadow Attorney General with responsibility for two-spirited LGBTQIA+ issues. Before being elected as MPP, Kristen Wong Tam was a city councilor for Toronto Centre, an entrepreneur and human rights advocate. And our third MPP that will be joining us, also in opposition, is Ashlyn Clancy, gender pronoun she, her, MPP for Kitchener Centre, an education critic for the Green Party of Ontario. So meanwhile, we wait for the members of provincial parliament. We are going to go towards, again, another grounding, again, through artistic expression in our core messaging of No to Bill 33, fund our schools, fund our communities, not policing in schools through the protest choir.
That we did, and it was originally sung by Sweet Honey in the Rock. This song pays tribute to Ella Baker. Ella Baker was a prominent organizer during the civil rights movement and was known for being a mentor for youth and advocating for the youth to organize and advocate for their rights in the way that they feel would be best for their futures. And she used her expertise and her experience and her knowledge to support them in those endeavors. Just to echo the sentiment from the speaker earlier that it does take a village, and Ella Baker exemplified that, and so this song is in honor of that. We who believe in freedom will not rest until it happens. Our next speakers, as previously introduced, is MPP Chandra Pasma and MPP Kristen Wong Tam with the Ontario New Democratic Party.
Here, I'm Chandra Pasma, the MPP for Ottawa West McKeon and the official opposition Shadow Minister for Education. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of you who have come out today in solidarity with communities who have been very clear they do not want police in our schools and who have been very clear that their children do not feel safe in our schools. As a parent and as the Shadow Minister for Education, I have heard from parents across our province their concerns about what is happening in our schools. Larger class sizes, a shortage of qualified teachers and education workers, a lack of mental health professionals, cuts to special education. This is what happens when you cut more than $6 billion out of our education system. But instead of, absolutely, that is a shame, but instead of addressing those funding challenges, Doug Ford and Paul Calandra are trying to distract us by attacking the rights of parents and communities to have a say in our schools. They are trying to shut the voices of parents and local communities out of our schools, to impose people who will be able to make all of the decisions for our children, all of the decisions for our communities, without having to consult a single person and without having to be accountable for a single decision that they are making. And we can already see the effects of that in the boards that the minister has already put under supervision. Increases to class sizes for kids with special needs. Cuts to special education programming, including kids with disabilities in Thames Valley who are sitting at home right now because the supervisor won't even do the assessments to figure out what they need to allow them to be at school. What we need to be doing is investing in these kids. And instead, the minister is trying to shut out the voices of communities who have been very clear that they do not want police in our schools and that their kids do not feel safe in school when police are present. They are ignoring the report of the Ontario Human Rights Commissioner, who said that this decision should always be made in consultation with parents and experts. They do not care about the human rights of these communities. They do not care about the human rights of our children. They want to impose on our communities something that our communities have said very clearly they do not want. And they are doing this at a moment when we do have a violence crisis in our schools, where we are seeing violence against students, teachers, and education workers on the rise. But that violence problem is the direct result of their cuts. It is the direct result of the lack of supports for our children in our schools. It is the result of the frustration of needs not being met every single day. And you do not address a crisis like that by policing our children. It is not fair to set our kids up to fail and then punish them for failing. What our children need is qualified teachers and education workers. They need mental health professionals. They need special education supports. Police officers are not qualified to fill any of those roles. And so what we want today is for the Premier and the Minister of Education to fund our schools, to provide the supports that our kids need, not to penalize our kids for the failures of this government. So today the NDP stands in solidarity with you in demanding that the government withdraw Bill 33.
Thank you very much, Chandra. Thank you, MPP Pasma. Thank you, Andrea, and the coalition for being here in support of defeating Bill 33. I'm Kristen Wong-Tam, your Shadow Attorney General, and I'm also very proud to be here with some of my colleagues from the NDP caucus. We have Alexa Gilmore, as well as Catherine McKenney, and Terrence Kernahan. How could you miss this guy? You know, we have seen Doug Ford do everything he can to distract us from the real issues and the crisis that is brewing up in our schools. He is refusing to fund education. We are seeing that 40% of our school boards are facing and running deficits. He has defunded school by $6.35 billion, and school students are receiving much less now than ever before. Student funding is down $1,500 since Doug Ford became Premier. Our schools are crumbling. Our classrooms are oversized. Our students with autism and special needs are getting no support. Is it any wonder with oversized classrooms where we are seeing so much crowding, sometimes 30, 31, 32, and 34 students in the classroom, is there any wonder there is violence? Violence that has risen up by 114% since 2017. And Mr. Ford is setting up our students for more failure. He refuses to take any accountability for the things that he has done wrong. Putting cops in classrooms are not going to make our students safer. It's not going to build safer communities, neighborhoods, and classrooms. It does nothing to solve the problem. It does harm and criminalize Black, Indigenous, racialized students, which we know from the previous times that they tried to implement cops in schools, is that those students are going to be further punished and criminalized. He's setting them up for failure. Are we going to take this quietly? No! Are we going to stand up and fight back? Yes! Are we going to make sure that students' voices are centered in this discussion every single time? Yes! We need to hear from parents from across Ontario. We need you to stand up, as you have been, but we need you to get louder. Talk to people in your community. We need the parents to understand that it is their voices that Bill 33 is stripping away. It's parents' voices that will not be heard when they take away the school board trustees. It is the parents' voices who will not be heard, who will not be there to support their students when they continue to defund public education so they can set up a path of private schools and private education. Is that what we want? No! Will we fight back? Yes! We have no choice. Public education is the backbone and the cornerstone of building equity and equality in our province. We need to do everything to make sure that Bill 33 is defeated. Now, there is a lot to be said about putting cops in classrooms, something we know we don't need. What do students need? They need smaller classrooms. They need their schools to be properly funded. We need more education workers, teachers, and special education workers. We need mental health supports for students. That is how we build safer communities. That's how we build safer classrooms. We will do everything we can to support you in this amazing coalition. You have been fighting so hard, and organizing all summer long. I've seen the rallies pop up across Ontario, and I know you're doing this with very little support and money. While we have big corporate interests who have dominated the Premier's office, you are truly the grassroots rising. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for fighting for public education. Thank you for making sure that Mr. Ford and his cabinet listen to you. We are here to support you. We will never ever back away from supporting you when it comes to defending and properly funding public education. Thank you very much for all that you do.
To New Democratic Party, who has always been in support of funding our schools, addressing the social, systemic, and structural determinants of health inequity, and pushing against the mandate of policing in schools. We saw that as well with the former Ontario New Democrat MPP Jill Andrew, who last year had tabled our 2 paper petitions. One of the paper petitions mandating the removal of all forms of police and school programs, and the second paper petition looking at uprooting the multiple ways that policing and carceral measures operates within our schooling and educational spaces, such as seclusion, restraint, chemical restraint, and much more, and demanding that the Ford government properly fund and resource public education. As a reminder, those 2 petitions are at our learning booth. Please sign them, because the Ontario New Democrat MPP Kristen Wong-Tam will be retabling them with new signatures from across the province to send a clear message to Doug Ford. No to Bill 33. Fund our schools, fund our communities, not policing in schools. Thank you. And so up next, as well as previously had introduced, we are going to be having also the Green Party member Aisling Clancy, MPP for Kitchener Centre, supporting again the message.
Thank you, Andrea. Give it up for Andrea! I'm so grateful to be with you today. I'm MPP Aisling Clancy, member for Kitchener Centre and Deputy Leader of the Green Party. And I was a school social worker for 11 years. So I've kind of seen the ebbs and flows of this government, and I know that what we need, like MPP Wong-Tam said, is mental health supports for our kids with special needs, and smaller class size ratios, because I don't think when I was going through school they ever said we need more policing to help kids with mental health and behaviors. You know what they said? They said we need caring adults. And not to say that these cops aren't caring adults, right? But we are talking about CYWs, social workers, more teachers, and more supports in our schools. But I think what this government really up to do today is to divide us so they can privatize us. Shame. So every time we talk about a bike lane and a speed camera, yes, these things matter. It's like they know that kids matter to us. They know that our safety matters to us, and they punch down. This is an exercise in punching down. Who are we punching down on? Black young men, racialized youth, Indigenous, racialized youth. That's who is disproportionately affected by these so-called solutions. This doesn't come from evidence. It doesn't come from compassion. It doesn't come from safety in schools. This is not going to make schools more safe. If you talk to students who are racialized and impacted by policing in a way that is disproportionate, they will not feel more safe at school. We know when that lid is flipped and people don't feel safe in school, they don't learn. So this is not going to help us with outcomes. What they're trying to do is to divide us so they can privatize us. And they're punching down. Shame, exactly. So I'm here today to say we need to call on this government, and we need to work across party lines. We need to work across levels of government and unite around all of these issues, because what they've done is they've starved our system, and then it breaks, and then they use an emotion-based trending thing on X to come up with a solution to this issue. Don't get me wrong, we need police officers that understand how to work with youth and understand how to work with school communities. We need caring adults in our schools, but we do not need uniformed officers with guns walking the hallways of our school system. That does not help kids when they're feeling triggered. It doesn't help kids when they're acting out. What they need is someone who they trust, who can regulate them and help them move out of that behavior and into a learning environment and feel like they can regulate themselves. So I am opposed to Bill 33. I think it's just another way that we claim to solve an issue that's really caused by the starvation of our public institutions. So whether it's our colleges that are being starved and dismantled, whether it's our municipalities, whether it's our school system or our hospital system, well, we end up fighting these fights, exhausted as frontline workers, as people who care for kids, exhausted at fighting and putting ourselves in front of these harmful policies. And at the same time, they've got their hand in the cookie jar with the slush development fund, handing dollars out to their friends and family while our schools are starved. $6.3 billion short in funding. So what we need right now is adequate funding to pay more qualified staff and treat people with respect, because those staff right now are overworked and burdened by the needs they see in school, the unmet needs. It's a moral injury. It's a moral injury to every education worker right now, and they're struggling to get by every day. So that's why every education worker that shows up, what is it? It's a hustle for fail-to-fills, because people are sick, they're tired, and they can't show up sometimes. And so principals are hustling just to make sure that we can staff the basic minimum of schools. And so kids are going out without their CYW support. Kids are going out with their spec ed support, and it is a mad dash. We have EAs and CYWs that have to cover a whole whack of kids who have special needs and need them in the moment. They're spread thin, and that's why one after the other kids' needs are going unmet. And so it is the Hunger Games of public institutions trying to just pay the bills. And we have to say enough is enough. Right? Enough is enough. Thank you, Jill. Jill Andrews, everybody! Give it up for Jill! She's with us every day. So guys, keep up the fight on Bill 33. Let's continue to expose them for underfunding our hospitals, our education system, our universities and colleges. And a big shout out to all the education workers who are here with us today and fighting the good fight every day, showing up for kids every day. And let's say more caring adults and less policing in our school hallways. And let's make sure that the government doesn't continue to divide us so that they can privatize us. Thanks, everybody.
To the organizer for over a decade, I do have to throw some shade right now. Okay, I gotta throw some shade. There is a reason as to why there is the absence of liberal MPPs here. And that is because in 2017, after the removal of the police in school program at the largest school board in Canada, the removal of the SRO program, the next day, at a press conference, when I was with a different organization, I had asked Mitzi Hunter at that time, the Liberal Minister of Education, to step in and remove police and school programs across the province. The Liberal MPP Minister of Education at that time, Mitzi Hunter, painted this issue as a local issue rather than the systemic issue that we know that it is. Shame! Those are the exact same talking points that this conservative government has provided to us as well. And so that shade needs to be amplified because the absence is known and it is felt. Shame! Shame! And I do see here former MPP Jill Andrew will be speaking with us. Dr. Jill Andrew has provided immense support. Dr. Jill Andrew, gender pronouns she, her, is an award-winning educator, community engager, journalist, and speaker. Her career spans work as a child and youth worker, student equity and human rights advisor, and long-time body justice advocate. In June 2018, Dr. Andrew made history as the first queer Black person elected to any provincial legislature in Canada, serving as a member of provincial parliament in Ontario's Legislative Assembly. As an official opposition shadow minister, she advocated for women's social and economic opportunities, arts, culture, and heritage with the Ontario New Democratic Party. Jill Andrew.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? How are we doing? Let's make sure the Ford government and his cronies inside hear us. How are we doing? Are we going to stop fighting for students and teachers and education workers and society? No! Are we going to stop fighting for our parents and our caregivers? No! Absolutely. We're going to say what to Bill 33? No! Exactly. Before I start, I want to say a heartfelt thank you, of course, to Andrea, to Policing Free Schools. Can we give her a round of applause? Everyone who helps make this happen. I also want to shout out our trustees. We have Trustee Debbie King here. We have Trustee Dee Williams here. These are our democratically elected trustees who are supposed to be serving the teachers, the parents, the kids, the custodians, the librarians, the education workers, the administration, their community. They are elected democratically to do so. And Doug Ford, boo, has decided to remove our trustees, gut them of the power they have to help us build communities, to be a liaison between our parents and our students. And that is just downright dirty. It's a mess. It is a hot mess, as some of my former students would tell me. But we are not going to give up. We are not going to give up, because that's exactly what the oppressor likes folks who are being oppressed, who are being hit by systemic barriers to do. And that is to give up, roll over, and play dead. We are absolutely not going to do that. And we're going to keep fighting against Bill 33. I had the honor of tabling the Policing Free Schools petitions, over a year ago? Long before Bill 33 and Motion 145, blah, 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 were in the headlines. And I did so because as a child and youth worker, as a teacher, as a student equity program advisor, as a Black queer woman, I kind of have an idea of what it takes to make schools operate the way they're supposed to be. And I can assure you, it doesn't include police in schools. What it does include is investment in education workers. It includes investment in our teachers. It includes smaller classrooms where we can give kids the exceptional education they deserve while protecting, maintaining the safety, the integrity, and the ability for our caring adults who are, they making lemonade out of real lemons, are doing on a daily basis. I can't say that enough. Education has been chronically underfunded, under-resourced, understaffed by this government. We're talking to the tune of what, 6.2 billion and counting? Dollars stripped away from our public education. And we know that this is part of a larger privatization scheme. This dude in here, the premier, and his Patsy Pacini, and his other cronies, they've created this, slush fund. What's it called? The Skills Development Fund? $2.5 billion, hundreds of millions going to Ford besties? Trips to Paris? Front row seats? The Jays? Go Jays. Or go hockey. I'm not really a big sports person, I'm a Raptors person. Right, but all this is not the priority here, man. If this premier really wants to invest in skills development, let's start in the classroom. That is the future.
future of our economy. Those are the people who are going to pour in socially, culturally, and economically in the world around them. We got to support our youth. We got to support the adults that are taking care of them across the clock, over the clock, every day. And make no mistake, Bill 33 also has negative implications for post-secondary students. We know post-secondary students are feeling the pinch of the affordability crisis. We know that things like mental health supports and food bank services are barely scraping by. We want this government controlling ancillary funds? This government? The same government that's giving away gifts to their friends? The same government that's building a, $100 million fantasy tunnel? The same government that's putting, a therma price tag on all of our backs, billions of dollars? And we're gonna trust them? No! With our post-secondary students' futures? No! Let's not also forget that Bill 33 wants to prioritize merit-based admissions. Listen, I have nothing against working hard. I don't. We need to work hard. And I'll tell you, when I was a child and youth worker, a teacher, even a prof, I won't lie, I didn't give students any favors. I didn't get favors. But I'll tell you this, even with hard work, when we live in a society that is still fraught with the consequences of colonialism, that are still fraught by the consequences of white supremacy, that are still fraught by anti-black racism, anti-indigenous racism, every ism and phobia you can imagine. We know that no matter how hard you work, there are going to be barriers that will impact many of us here, and most certainly our kids, from the first day of school to the last day of the PhD program. Trust me, I know about it. Differently than their white, male, cisgender, heteronormative, able-bodied, middle-class peers. So I am not suggesting that merit doesn't matter, that hard work, that the dollar, the number, the quantitative statistical number that you receive doesn't matter. But we are so much more than numbers. We are stories, we are lived experience. We are the truth of the difficulties it takes us to get from point A to B, when some communities have excellent transit and others don't. So we need our schools to take into consideration the full student. And that full student includes their resistance, and yes, to some extent, their resilience, I personally hate that word, against oppression. But it needs to recognize that that oppression exists. So I want us to keep fighting. Our friends who are in here, who are elected from any party, they know the truth of this bill. They know that this bill is not investing the $1,500 from every student that Doug Ford has stolen. We know that this bill is not repaying our education system the $6.2 billion and counting that this government has stolen. We know that this bill is not the answer. The answer is consulting with our communities. The answer is speaking to our kids at all levels of education. The answer is bringing our trustees back to the table as trustees, not clipping their wings. And the answer is getting the job done in a fair and equitable and justice-centered way. Because make no mistake, what the government is taking away from education now, they will pay for it. We will all pay for it later. We know that. Invest now. Invest now. So thank you very much. Say no to Bill 33. We are absolutely saying no to policing in schools. The research tells us, the kids tell us, the teachers, the education workers,
Everyone in our school buildings tell us what they need. And on none of those lists are police in schools. Thank you very much. My name's Jill.
Up next, we have a surprise pop-up from a student. Dante Hillen, gender pronouns he, him, is a grade 12 student leader from Hamilton. A proud member of Student Voices in Action Ontario, which is also one of our Policing Free Schools provincial and national campaign partner, where they collectively increase students' involvement in issues impacting their education and are connecting with and supporting students across Ontario in opposition to Bill 33, including in opposition to policing in schools. He advocates for centering student perspectives in education policy across Ontario, and through his leadership, Dante helps facilitate conversations around equity, truth, and reconciliation, ensuring that young people are not only heard, but actively shaping the future and present of education. Dante?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and making space to talk about something that deeply affects students, family, and communities in Ontario, Bill 33. My name is Dante Hillen, and I'm a proud member of the Student Voices in Action initiative. This is an initiative that brings student perspectives into education policy and decision-making across our province. I'm a grade 12 student leader from Hamilton, and I'm someone who deeply believes in the power of student voice, even when that voice is challenged, doubted, or dismissed. Because the truth is, student voices are already not censored in decision-making. As student trustees, we work every day to change that, to bring the perspectives of students into spaces where decisions are made about our education, our well-being, and our futures. We help bridge the gap between students and those in power, ensuring that our lived experiences aren't just heard, but are respected. As Indigenous student trustees, we also help facilitate the hard conversations about truth, about reconciliation, and what it means to make education a space that reflects and respects all identities. But Bill 33 threatens to silence that work. Shame. It would remove the very people who carry student voice into decision-making spaces. And if that happens, students will be even more alienated from the one structure that allows them to speak up, through us. They're democratically elected and appointed student trustees. This isn't just a policy change. It's a step backwards for democracy, for reconciliation, and for every young person who has ever spoken up and hoping to make a difference across our province. Students and communities have worked tirelessly to rename schools and move away from colonial legacies to create spaces that reflect who we are today, not who we were forced to be. Bill 33 reverses that progress by giving the Minister of Education the power to undo or block those changes, to rewrite history again. So what message does that send to Indigenous students? Shame. It is shameful. To any student who's fought to make their school feel like home. When I first became a student trustee, I wanted to be a voice for those who couldn't speak, for students who felt unseen, unheard, or forgotten. And I carry them with me every single day. This bill doesn't just erase names on schools, it erases trust, it erases healing, and it tells young people that their voices don't matter. But I'm here to tell you, we do matter. And I have to say, we're not just the future waiting to be invited in the table, we are already present. We're already here, and we're already learning. So I'm asking everyone here to pay attention, to talk about this bill, and share what you've learned. Ask the hard questions, because silence is what allows power to go unchecked. and our voices are what keeps democracy alive. When systems crack, light finds its way in. And that light, it's all of us. The students, families, and communities who refuse to give up. So I leave you today with the question that I ask myself every single day. Is this what democracy looks like? Good wish.
Genocide. Shame. The same racist logics that once justified, quote, tough on crime reforms and still do, now label these students as threats for opposing a genocide and attempt to justify the militarization of our schools. Bill 33 feeds that same climate of fear and punishment, and none of this overlap is coincidental. Systems, equity, diversity, and inclusion here to take to deeper cuts, less support, and more control under the Ford government. And now, Bill 33 extends this logic of austerity. Surveillance instead of support, punishment instead of resourcing. Beyond increasing impacts that will disproportionately harm disabled youth, I think about what the centralization of power will mean towards access to resources for youth and families. The Ontario Human Rights Commission reports that while disabled youth make up about 17% of school populations, they represent 47% of suspensions and 40%. Shame. Last year, People for Education reported EA ratios of 1 to 39 in elementary schools and 1 to 85 in secondary schools. We know that disabled youth have been failed time and time again in our schools. And according to the Ontario Autism Coalition's 2025 Special Education Survey, over 100,000 families of disabled children and youth reached out to trustees for advocacy during last school year alone. Trustees are often the last line of defense, if at all, for families navigating exclusion, punitive violence, inaccessible schools, and underfunding. And Bill 33 will take even that away. It will isolate families, cut off accountability, and defund supports for disabled youth further, removing the limited means of recourse they have left. I think about the stories shared by youth in Hamilton during my time as a student trustee, about Black youth dancing with their friends and being handcuffed and accused of being gang members by police officers, about young girls being harassed by police officers in schools and not being believed, about youth being carted in the hallways, restrained, chemically restrained, and humiliated. This is what policing in schools looks like. And I want folks to remember that policing free schools has always been a youth-led fight. From the student strikes of the late 1990s and early 2000s against the Harris government's cuts, to the 2019 province-wide walkouts against privatization, to more recent ways of organizing that forced multiple school boards, including the TDSB, Peel, Hamilton, Wentworth, and beyond, to end their police and school programs. Students have always led the call for care over control. That resistance continues today with groups and student organizers across Ontario, like Student Voices in National Ontario, holding institutions accountable when they fail to defend and protect public education. But this work does come at a cost. For years, young people have been forced to carry the weight of demanding the bare minimum, safety, care, and dignity, from institutions that are silencing them. And I think about how youth are simultaneously adultified and infantilized depending on what's convenient for adults in power. They're adultified and portrayed as violent in order to justify their criminalization, but infantilized, silenced, and deemed incapable of knowing their own realities and circumstances and experiences when it's time for adults in power to exert control. I'm 23 now, and I've been saying the same thing about policing in schools since I was 16 years old. And I think about all the people who fought policing in schools, who fought against policing in schools before me. The Black and brown youth in Hamilton who fought for years before the termination at the HWDSB's Police Liaison Program, and those who continue to fight now, like the amazing youth at Student Voices for Action Ontario. It's been 7 years for me, and I'm tired, and I think about the ways in which this government is stealing so many child lives. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If we let police return to our schools in this capacity, we are not just bringing back individual officers. We are reinforcing a culture of surveillance, of punishment, and of fear. Their presence can, does, and will exacerbate carceral and militaristic practices, whether that be physical restraints, chemical restraints, seclusion rooms, suspensions, expulsions, or beyond. And these are the everyday manifestations of the school-prison nexus. Since my time as a high school student and a student trustee, I've always asked young people one question: what does your dream school look like? And I invite the rest of us to also think about this. Dreaming has always been a radical act, and the cultural design of our defunded education system demands that we forget how to do this. It conditions us to abandon imagination, abandon our childhoods, and lose hope that liberatory schooling spaces could ever exist. And yet, every time I've asked this question, the responses are clear and unwavering. Youth want schools rooted in restorative practices, schools built with universal access at their core, outdoor classrooms, one-on-one supports, arts programs with real funding, food programs, accessible transit, smaller classrooms, and above all, no police. Because we know that safety does not come from surveillance or punishment, but from being fed, supported, and loved within our schools. We know better, we've dreamed better, and we will not stop fighting, because even one young person harmed by police in their school is one too many. Thank you.
Up next, continuing to delve into the connection of Bill 33 and the elimination of elected school board trustees as an attack on democracy is Sabrina Dab. Gender pronouns she, her, is the Ward 2 trustee for the Hamilton 1/4 District. She has been community organizing and the fight against Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian racism, and policing in schools. Sabrina is a recent graduate from the Masters of Labor Studies program at McMaster University. Sabrina.
Hi everybody, thank you for having me. I brought up some of my trustee colleagues at the Toronto District School Board, one of the school boards actively under supervision by this ministry. And they've continued to show up to fight against this bill, to protect and fight for students. So I wanted to make sure that they had the chance to also be here with us. My name is Sabrina Dahab, and I'm a school board trustee in Hamilton, Ontario. And I'm here echoing the voices of students, of educators, of parents, union leaders across this province who are demanding that we stop Bill 33 and that we keep police out of our schools. I was on the front lines in 2020 after our multiple year-long battle against the police liaison program in schools in Hamilton, where we successfully advocated for the removal. And there's one story from that evening that always stuck with me. There was one student in one of our schools, a young black student, who was arrested from his school, was taken down to a holding cell, only to be told that they had the wrong kid. Shame. Imagine the trauma of experiencing that and having to walk back into the school after that. That's not safety. And this is not a unique experience, but the reality of what policing in schools does. That's an education system facilitating the criminalization of youth and children. There's been a lot of conversations about Bill 33 and what it is, and so I'm not going to repeat all of that, but what we do know is that Bill 33 is a smokescreen for a system being deliberately defunded. And I know the conversations about policing in schools is charged. And at its core, I know for some parents it comes from a perception that policing in schools will make us safer. But we have to be very, very clear that policing will not get us there. Right now, students are walking into schools that are in a state of disrepair. There are massive backlogs on maintenance. Across this province, we're seeing aging infrastructure, poor ventilation, leaky roofs, asbestos, accessibility barriers. If you have children or you work in the school, you know that classrooms are sweltering in the summer and freezing in the winter. Shame. And at the same time, schools don't have the supports or the resources they truly need to support students. Mental health supports are stretched thin. Some schools don't have a single nurse or social worker. Teachers and education workers are being asked to carry the weight of a system being deliberately broken. These are not conditions conducive to learning. They're not conditions we tolerate in any other public system, certainly not one we should be tolerating for students and staff. And they don't just affect education, they affect safety. Fixing these things isn't separate from school safety. It is school safety. A warm, well-maintained building with trusted staff and adequate support creates stability. It creates the kind of environment where students and staff feel respected and cared for and protected. That is what real safety looks like. Police in schools will not fix cracked walls or deal with lead in water. Police officers can't provide disabled students with one-on-one supports. They won't replace the need for mental health workers, after-school programs, stable housing, or smaller class sizes. In fact, there's ample evidence that suggests that police presence will escalate situations, does criminalize students, and will disproportionately harm Black and Brown students. Now, these conditions are not an accident, they are by design. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternative released a report that says that since 2018, Ontario has underfunded schools by $6.3 billion. Shame. I want you to imagine what $6.3 billion could do for public education. How many more EAs could we hire? How many more educational supports? How many more math and literacy facilitators? How much better and safer could our system be with $6.3 billion more dollars? These are the conditions that are a result of a deliberate and underfunding of a system and a broader political agenda of privatization. We are witnessing a manufacturing of a crisis where you starve the system, you watch it struggle, then you justify expanding centralized power and policing as a solution. Bill 33 doesn't fix the problems in our schools, it deepens them while also creating the conditions for privatization. We need investment, we need care, we need resources, and we need to protect public education from a government actively trying to dismantle it under the guise of reform. Thank you.
We're going to be highlighting the waste of taxpayer dollars on non-evidence-based, harmful policing and carceral measures, particularly through technological surveillance in schooling spaces. Dr. Behan Farhadi, gender pronoun she, her, is an assistant professor of educational policy and equity at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. Her research focuses on surveillance technology in public schools, online education, and resistance to neoliberal restructuring. Dr. Farhadi draws from extensive experience in teaching in secondary schools and public education advocacy to bridge research and practice. Dr. Farhadi.
Everybody, thank you for the invitation to speak today, for the collective work you're doing, the solidarity you're building to demand a policing-free future for Ontario schools. I'm here as a researcher at the University of Toronto studying surveillance technology in public education, kind of call this the police you can't see, federally funded and in partnership with policing-free schools. I'm also a former classroom teacher, a parent, and a student of underserved communities that raised me. And when I imagine education for my children and for the children in my care, the children I share the world with, it does not include police or the logic of policing marketed as safety. And as many here have already said, Bill 33 is not about safety, it's about surveillance and control. It's a sweeping power grab that expands carceral authority in schools, eliminates democratic oversight, and uses fear, especially the government's tough on crime rhetoric to justify new tools of discipline and monitoring. More CCTV cameras, student activity reporting, tracking systems, social media monitoring, device monitoring platforms to observe behavior in and outside the classroom, even in the home. They expand these tools through making the public scared of students, scared of children. Fear has always been a powerful political tool. It's a tool of weak government, of a government with short-term vision, a government that wants to distract our focus from their failures. And when governments claim they're protecting children from danger by positioning them as the cause of danger, they can rationalize almost everything. More policing, more cameras, more data collection. But these aren't solutions to violence or disconnection. They're strategies of control, and they embed surveillance of police that are accessed by police in our schools, often without our knowledge. But here's what we know. Classrooms are overcrowded, liberatory mental health supports are scarce, buildings are crumbling, and instead of addressing these conditions, instead of investing and strengthening the communities that schools are part of, the Ford government responds with more policing, more cameras, more monitoring. This is a choice. This is not an inevitability. And last year I wrote about Ontario's $30 million investment in surveillance technology, from threat reporting apps to behavior tracking systems. And these are marketed as safety tools, but they operate as technologies of control. They collect data on students' movements and emotions, shaping how teachers manage classrooms, how students learn to govern themselves under constant watch. And Bill 33 extends that logic. It mandates police access and police-run programs. It overrides local decision-making. It expands the architecture of surveillance and education, embedding policing not just through officers, but through policy, technology, and governance structures that enforce obedience through fear. For students who are Black, Indigenous, racialized, disabled, neurodivergent, undocumented, queer, and trans, for them, surveillance isn't safety. It is scrutiny and punishment. And if we continue down this path, we'll wake up in more schools that look like communities, less schools that look like communities, and more that look like checkpoints, places where students are scanned, not seen, managed, not mentored. And I don't want us to look at other examples and think this can't happen to us. It can, and it is. But I am hopeful. I'm hopeful to be here with you. I'm hopeful because this government does respond to public pressure. It's not consistent in its decisions, and this inconsistency gives us power. And I think there's so many options to respond, particularly with the calls to action by policing free schools, and make your voice part of the public record. They count those calls, they notice when we organize, and it matters that we take the time. We also need to move with a long-term vision for education, one that doesn't rely on short-term, fear-based fixes for complex social problems. Policing is a response to failed social policy, and that failure is not inevitable. It's an outcome of choices made by people every day, and we can make different ones. Thank you.
We're going to move towards looking at the post-secondary systemic issues and coming back to Bill 33, and then we'll be delving into the social political landscape as to how Bill 33 is connected to multiple additional legislation that is currently right now being proposed, as well as has become legislation, as well as other actions that this government has taken. And so at this moment, we are going to be presenting, again, the Canadian Federation Students of Ontario. They are going to be speaking on the systemic issues that are impacting young people and folks multi-generationally in post-secondary. Omar Musa, gender pronouns he, him, is the National Executive Representative of the CFS Ontario. Omar's advocacy began by organizing student protests against the complicity of the University of Toronto administration in the ongoing apartheid and genocide in Palestine. He continues his work through fighting for a free and accessible education, a free Palestine, and a just world. Omar?
I am the National Executive Representative of the Canadian Federation of Students, Ontario. We represent over 350,000 students across the entire province, spread across 35 different member locals. As Sylvia said earlier, education across all levels is a vital public good. It is a fundamental human right. Despite this fact, we continue to see deliberate attempts by the government to destabilize education in Ontario. This government continues to chronically underfund our education, and instead of recognizing the true issues that we face as students, the government is instead giving us misleading proposals through things such as Bill 33. The state of education will not be fixed with increased security and government oversight. The deteriorating conditions that students and workers are exposed to are unjust. Students are forced to take up multiple jobs just to make a living. Students have to worry about paying for their unreasonably expensive tuition while facing housing precarity and experiencing food insecurity, and then being expected to be able to balance all of that alongside their studies. Shame! Shame! International students continue to be scapegoated while simultaneously exploited. They are blamed for the housing crisis and the cost of living crisis while paying outrageous tuition fees that keep institutions alive. Alongside that, we're seeing a rise in campus policing and surveillance. From increased police presence to the monitoring of student organizing, this doesn't create safety. This creates fear. The government is attempting to send a message that students expressing their right to protest is a threat to be controlled rather than voices to be heard. Attempting to put a muzzle on academic freedom, discouraging protests, and putting more pressure on the same communities who are already facing the most barriers. Shame! We are seeing the effects of this government's continuous neglect of post-secondary education. Alongside the struggles of students, the education system in and of itself is also struggling. Programs are being cut, campuses are being shut down, and faculty and staff are being laid off en masse. If the government truly cared for education as they claim they do, they would tackle these issues with dedicated funding to funding across education across all levels. Instead, the education doesn't have to look like this. If the government ceases its attempts of privatizing our education further and instead treats education as a human right, we can see education across Ontario thrive. With a fully funded education system, we would see a more accessible form of education. More people will be able to access education across all levels, especially for marginalized groups and communities who have consistently been underrepresented throughout education. With proper funding for education, we would see higher quality of education. The working conditions of faculty, academic workers, and support staff directly equate to the learning conditions of students. When workers are treated fairly, the environment will properly thrive. We could see better facilities and upkeep of our campuses with support of learning environments such as our labs and libraries across our institutions. Students' financial burden would be lessened. By tearing down these financial barriers, it allows it so students wouldn't need to be working longer hours or have to worry about financial strain due to their education. A fully funded education system would eliminate student debt for all. We'd be seeing advancements in research as with more funding, we'll be seeing innovations in many different fields, ranging from medicine to technology to climate solutions and more. All forms of research that are desperate for funding right now that the government continues to funnel out of education and more into private companies. Shame! And this doesn't stop at colleges and universities. The same underfunding that we are seeing and privatization that continues to happen, and it continues to erode our primary and secondary schools as well. Elementary and high schools are overcrowded, understaffed, and are also severely underfunded. Teachers are overworked, classrooms are falling apart, and students continue losing access to essential support services. Services like mental health, services like special education, and services like the extracurricular programs that are available to students. Education is a right that applies from kindergarten to post-secondary. Every student deserves to learn in a system that is public, fully funded, and free from government control, oversight, and carcerality. The fight for a free and accessible education isn't just a fight about tuition fees. It is a fight to keep students involved in the decision-making regarding their education that they pay for. It is a fight to push back against the privatization and reclaim education for the people. It is a right to demand the government to get their hands off our education. Thank you.
On us in recognizing again that our public education system is under attack across all levels, not just K-12, including post-secondary as well. That our fight is an interconnected fight and that we are here in solidarity as partners. Up next, we have Education Union leader who will delve us into the connection of Bill 33 as a land grab. Nigel Bariff, gender pronouns he, him, is the Vice President of the Elementary Teachers of Toronto and President of the Urban Alliance on Race Relations. A board member of the Toronto York Labour Council and a singer-songwriter, he champions justice, peace, and love through activism, music, and community organizing across Toronto and beyond. Nigel?
Thank you, Andrea. Great job today, pulling us all together and continuing this fight. Friends, sibling, community, good afternoon. Doug Ford wants us fighting culture wars. Because if we're fighting each other, then we're not fighting him. They showed Fox News clips at a teacher PD day, trying to convince us that fear equals safety. They canceled an Islamic Heritage Month calligraphy workshop because a map of Palestine dared to show the truth. They condemned a school for singing "O Canada" in Arabic as if another language makes us less safe as Canadians. Let's call it what it is. Anti-Palestinian racism. That's what it is, and it's just a distraction. While they stir up fear and fear about identity and belonging, they've ripped $6.2 billion out of our schools. Say it with me, $6.2 billion. That's why classrooms are overcrowded. That's why teachers are paying out of pocket. That's why kids don't have what they need in their classrooms. And now they're pushing Bill 33, a law that expands policing in schools, erases local democracy, and sets the stage to sell off public spaces. It's not about safety. It's a power grab. It's a land grab, and it's about control. But here's what they'll never control, is us. Bruce Schools? Lies. We stand for a vision that's rooted in love and care and injustice, because defending public education means defending democracy itself. We will not let them sell off our school properties. We will not let them privatize the schools and enrich their Bay Street buddies. That's why we're all here together for hours out here. That's why we're here. So say it loud. No to Bill 33.
No to privatization union leader who will amplify the direct connection of policing in schools and a pathway towards privatization. Nadia Good, gender pronouns she, her, is an educator, union leader, and fierce advocate for equity and justice. Since 2011, she served the Peel District School Board, and since 2017, she's been a driving force in union leadership, Now, as president of the Peel Elementary Teachers Local. Nadia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nadia Good. I'm the president of the Peel Elementary Teachers Local, and I proudly representing nearly 7,000 public elementary educators in Peel. I'm also a mother of 4, 2 of which who are still navigating the public school system. And I stand here today with gratitude for the invite and in solidarity with Policing Free Schools Ontario and the National Policing Free Schools Canada campaign. The message is simple. Yes to fully funded, democratically governed, safe schools. No to police in our schools. Together, we have to cut through the smoke and the mirrors and demand for real solutions for our schools. Since taking office in 2018, you've heard it, Doug Ford has slashed $6.3 billion from Ontario's public education budget. And these cuts, they're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They've driven class sizes to unsustainable levels. They've left 70,000 children waiting for months, sometimes years, just to get the promised supports that they need. And they have created a crisis where now almost 95% of our schools are in desperate need of mental health supports. What is happening? Our students and our educators have been stretched beyond measure, and the province is sitting there insisting like everything is fine. So shame. While schools and boards buckle under this shortfall, the government brings in Bill 33 to strip communities of their elected school trustees and replace them with inexperienced supervisors appointed by the ministry. Shame. These supervisors don't know anything about our communities, and they only answer to Queen's Park. They don't answer to parents, they don't answer to educators, and they certainly don't answer to students. This power shift is another distraction. Strip local voices away, sow confusion, and then point the finger at educators for failing students. Shame. Let's be clear about the damage that is being done. The reports of violence in the workplace are coming in unprecedented rates, all because schools lack the supports that keep kids engaged and keep them safe. Teachers are exhausted, students are falling behind, and families are losing trust in a system that should uplift every child regardless of their background. Yes, students are left waiting for critical supports because the province won't fund them. Shame. This is not what Ontario families deserve. We deserve schools that reflect our values of care, inclusion, and collective responsibility. We deserve classrooms where teachers, support staff, and trustees can work together to lift up our children without the fear of watchful supervision or of police in our hallways. Yes, mandating police in schools isn't about safety. We've heard that message repeated throughout today. It is a deliberate distraction to divert our attention from the real crisis. But if we are able to look past the smoke, we can see what is really happening. Starving the schools of funding, watching the system strain under its weight, and then blaming us for failing children while calling for governance and reform. The reality is that the failure actually lies with the chronic underfunding, with top-down power grabs and that were strategically designed to pave the way towards privatization. Shame. Police budgets across this province continue to balloon, even while funding for schools vanishes. It is absolutely outrageous. Rather than investing in the supports that prevent crisis, this government continues to talk about bringing police back into our schools. But that is not the answer. They can never replace what caring professionals can do for our children.
So today, yes, today we call on Doug Ford and Minister Calandra to back off of Bill 33. No to Bill 33. End your push for policing in our schools and reinvest every single dollar into the classroom, into trusted adults, into educators, counselors, special education staff, smaller classrooms, and mental health services so our kids can grow and learn and thrive in our publicly funded education system. Thank you.
Protest choir, so let's get loud with them. Back again to the broader social political landscape, and particularly through recognizing that the dire conditions created for Ontarians are a policy choice. And Doug Ford has a track record and pattern of worsening conditions for us all. Gross negligence grounded in non-evidence-based and harmful measures. We have up next Patricia Borges, Nigeria, gender pronoun she, her, is a Toronto-based journalist and registered early childhood educator. Patricia has over 15 years of experience working with children and families in various settings and currently works as communications coordinator at the Association of Early Childhood Educators, Ontario. Patricia?
We've had like so many weathers today, yay, and we stayed through them all. Okay, like Andrea said, my name is Patricia. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a registered early child educator. I am a journalist. I'm an immigrant. I'm a former international student. And I currently work as communications coordinator at the Association of Early Child Educators, Ontario. But in the 15 years that I've been working with children and with their families, there's no role that brought me greater joy than being an ECE in a preschool room. The last time that I was in that role was in 2021. And I don't know if you remember, but that school year was a mess. We had schools closing, childcare staying open. Schools closing, childcare staying open. No vaccine prioritization. It was a chaotic mess. I said the word mess several times. But even though we had all of those chaotic protocols, we had closures, we had all of those things, that school year was one of the best years of my life as an ECE. The best years of my career, because we had 12 students, we had 12 children and 4 adults. With a smaller group of children and a consistent team, we were able to be very intentional with our practice and live our ECE values in ways that we were not able to before. We had time, but most importantly, we had the people to build strong relationships and create spaces where children felt safe, inspired, and curious. Spaces where they felt safe to fully be themselves, have their needs met. That experience showed me that when educators, when early child educators, education workers, teachers, when we are given the resources we need, it is possible to create spaces that focus on care. Spaces where punishment and carceral practices are unthinkable. The same could be true for the entire education system. However, currently, neither early learning, primary, secondary, or post-secondary education are getting the resources that they need. Bill 33 moves our systems further away from meeting the needs of students or educators and further away from the hopeful potential of care. When police programs are placed in schools, it impacts everyone in the community, including the before and after school programs, school-based childcare, and early on programs who get no say on police presence in their environment. We know that many ECEs, children, families, communities, especially Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities, experience violence and systemic oppression from police. The requirement to invite and incorporate police into schools is not only a violent decision, but one that puts educators, students, and their families at risk of harm, bypassing their human rights. Bill 33 proposes a solution based on cruelty, not on care. Rather than Bill 33, this government needs to make true investment in what works to create exceptional education experiences for all students. Like I said before, when teachers, when early child educators, educational assistants, and everyone who makes learning possible are given the resources they need, which is small classes, enough staffing, good pay, decent working conditions, planning time, things that should be standard in our profession. And when our environments are intentionally set up for our communities, with well-maintained structures and enough janitorial staff to keep the spaces clean and safe, when those things happen, when our communities are supported and our work is properly funded, it is possible to create education where all kids are getting the attention, the support, supportive relationships, and the care that they need to not just survive the system, but to thrive. Fund our schools, fund our communities, not policing schools. Thank you.
Slava Avila Montenegro, gender pronoun she, her, is currently the Executive Director of the Federation of Metro Toronto Tenants Associations. She's the daughter of Mapuche refugees from Wallmapu, currently known as Chile, and organizes on topics of indigenous rights, economic and social justice, making the connections between Bill 17 and Bill 33. Yaroslava.
Everyone. My name is Yaroslava. I'm with the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations. We've been around since 1974, trying to organize every tenant in this city and trying to be able to create a tenant movement powerful enough across the province to take these folks on behind us. The fact of the matter is that this government has been attacking working class communities all throughout, not just this city, but all throughout Ontario for the past 6 years, and they continue to do so. In the last few months, we have seen legislation after legislation that overcomes democratic processes that are imposed in communities. Bill 17, as Andrea mentioned, is something that is specifically targeting municipal governments, and specifically when it comes to housing and housing crises. We are living in an affordability crisis. We have been in a housing crisis for over 30 years in this country. We have not seen we haven't seen we haven't seen a solution on behalf of Queen's Park. Do you know that if you rent in Ontario, that there are so many loopholes where you can legally be evicted? For example, if your landlord lives with you, the RTA doesn't protect you. If you, for example, sublease, you can get evicted. And these are the things that we have to connect together. The fact of the matter is that they don't care about our communities. They don't care about our kids going to schools. Who are the kids who are going to public schools every single day? It's the children of working class families who have to go through the public school system in order to be someone in their lives. And if they have housing instability, and if they don't have a place to eat and to sleep at night, where are these kids going to go? This legislation is only helping the school to prison pipeline. And it's being reinforced by a housing crisis where these folks behind us would rather give favors to their billionaire buddies and their landlord and developer friends instead of having to any semblance of solution to our communities. So I'm standing here today as a renter, as an activist, and as someone who wants to create a solution, not just for this city, but for the entire province. We need to organize our communities. Enough is enough. Enough of tenant power. We need to connect our communities across the province, across this city, to be able to take up City Hall, not just to take up City Hall, but to take up on this Ontario place, the legislature behind us, so that they know that we have the power. We have the power in numbers, and we have popular power. Say it with me. When I say tenant, you say power. Tenant!
Up next, we have Andrea Hatala, gender pronoun she, Her is the recipient co-chair of the Ontario Disability Support Program ODSP Action Coalition, a group of agencies and recipients that work to improve the ODSP program. Andrea?
Hi everybody. Thank you for holding out for such a long time today. This has been a long haul, but all these speeches are so important, and education is so important, and we don't want to see things going downhill, and they have been. So the ODSP Action Coalition is like a watchdog for the Ministry of Children and Community and Social Services and the Ontario Disability Support Program. Yay! Yeah, can I get a yahoo? All right. So this program provides income support for people with disabilities who can't work for various reasons, and it funds adults, but it also funds their children, and that's where this is important. Legislated poverty is a very, very, very important part of this equation. Because if people are hungry, or if people are feeling, socially abused because they're more poor than other people, and they can't wear the best clothes to schools or the same things that everybody else has, it might be one of the reasons why they act out in school. And legislative poverty can be solved by the government by just giving us more money. Yay! Yes, thank you. So, and the other thing that I just wanted to say was that the amount of money that is going to be spent to hire police for these schools, it costs over $500 a day to hire police for the schools. And every school that has, a police officer has $500 a day that they're taking away from the budget. And if they add $1,000 or double ODSP rates, then they can solve problems like homelessness. They can reduce the need for community food programs. They can, just for $1,000 a month, they can fund all these things, and it just makes so much more sense than spending all of this money on hiring police for each school.
That's right.
So it's like really it's really a choice between fascism and oppression and prosperity for everybody. And I think the choice is clear. Thank you.
Fund to the poly crisis, the manufactured crises of this government. And so we have two more speakers that are looking at the interconnected issues of Bill 33, among other actions by the Ford government and additional bills. Up next, we have Kevin Wilson, gender pronouns they, him, as a recovering journalist and activist with Harm Reduction Advocacy Collective, which will be making the connections, the punitive carceral connections of Bill 33 among multiple other bills that this government has.
Day out here now. I've got the sunshine along with me, and I've got an audience here that stuck it out for the whole time. You rock, both of you. Thank you very much. I just wanted to recall that I was asked to talk to you about how people who use drugs have a lot more in common with educators, students, and administrators than you may initially think, and I've got 5 minutes to do it. Yeah, no. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to you about loss and how we are impacted by losses. And the loss that comes when you lose something because someone took something away from you. And I've got a lot of experience about that in the last couple of years. I won't denounce drug use, but I won't condone it either. I will simply point out that life can be a really difficult and painful experience for a lot of people, and we naturally look for ways to cope with that pain. My own coping mechanism has been methamphetamine for the last couple of years, and injecting it for about half of that time. I mention this because this government, in its infinite wisdom, took away the one thing that I had that gave me hope during some of the worst and hardest periods of my life. On April 1st, I lost the first supervised consumption site that I had ever stepped foot in. And I'm sorry, I just lost my place here, but I'll get it back in just 1 second, because it's a little windy still, and that's great. That site and another 8 or 9 across the province got caught up in a tsunami of the worst of politics in Ontario. Those of us who were around when the Premier's little brother was mayor of Toronto, you remember that? I think in Germany they called him the Crackburgermeister. Know exactly the sort of politics I'm talking about. It works like this. You're a politician, and you find a group of people that you want to get voting for you. And so you find out the things that scare them the most and make them the angriest. And a little pandering and a catchy slogan, and hell, it doesn't even have to be a slogan. You can just shout some random word 3 times, and it works. You know, like subways, subways, subways. Do you remember that? That was a big thing back in the day. And so the Premier found a bunch of people who wanted to vote for him, and they were homeowners who lived near supervised consumption sites. And let me tell you, there are a few things angrier and more scared than a homeowner near an FCS. You get a couple catchy slogans, and a couple of that folksy Doug knows best sort of commentary. And just like that, those 5 FCSs were gone in Toronto and 5 more across the province. What just happened? Oh, I dropped my water bottle, that's all. It's nothing, it's not an amplifier or anything, so I'm good. And while someone spoke out about disclosure, I personally was passed out of the building behind me. It's a building that I've had the honor of working in the past, and that, you know, for some crazy reason, even now remains a symbol of responsive and representative government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I'm a sucker, obviously. The phone solicitors love me. But yeah, I still believe that in my heart of hearts, that this is a beacon for that place, even with all that's gone on in it. But my gesture, the voice of many of those, was not enough to save our supervised consumption sites, and it's not surprising. It's not as though people who use drugs are part of some incredibly well-organized and well-financed and really universally feared lobbying force known as Big Addict. other voices get a far more sympathetic ear around here. And I'm not for a second going to imply that Doug Ford is in the back pocket of developers, because that would be a shameful and scurrilous allegation. Or that his cabinet or his entire caucus are in the back pocket of developers, because that would be a shameful thing to say. I honestly can't think of a more appalling allegation made about the man who handed over the keys to Ontario Place and Science Center. Oh, holy mackerel! I think someone with a lot of hot air is really mad at me. But about a man who handed over the keys to Ontario Place and the Ontario Science Center to some completely above the board enterprises in a manner that was totally not sketchy. And so that two of our children's birthrights, the Science Center, get your hair to go up in the air, and Ontario Place are going to be transformed into luxury condos and a playground for the very wealthy. So if you believe stuff like that, you'll believe any kind of ridiculous thing, like maybe high-ranking elected officials are trafficked in, marijuana, or the devil's lettuce, or, the hashish, while they were in high school. I mean, that's a horrible allegation, but no one's ever been sued for it. Which brings me back to the issue I started with. These things that we've lost, Ontario Place, the Science Center, the supervised consumption sites, where the SCSs were concerned, those were grounded in evidence-based research. It showed that health outcomes are vastly improved for people who use drugs in a supervised consumption site setting. In fact, the most powerful determinant of whether a person is going to seek treatment for the substance use issue is entering through the doors of a supervised consumption site. The very sites that Doug Ford shut down. Harm reduction, the treatment model that illuminates how we do our work, saves lives. Creates better health outcomes, dramatically reduces the transmission of sexually transmitted and blood-borne infections like hepatitis and HIV. And it creates most powerful positive force for people who use drugs to drop on hope. The evidence state this, but I can share my own anecdotal evidence. I stepped through the doors of a supervised consumption site about 2 years ago, and I was in very bad shape in every way. I was homeless. I was emotionally in a very deep pit. Hope was a commodity in extremely short supply, and I stand before you today to say that I'm no longer homeless. Woo! I am physically in a far better place, emotionally in a far better place, and I am gainfully employed as a peer outreach worker, and I co-facilitate debriefings and educational workshops for my fellow peers. We didn't just lose those sites. I worry terribly about the people who are in as bad a place as I was, who won't have those opportunities now, and won't get the support that I received. That's been lost, but those are minor losses compared to the loss of Fabio, a client I supported just 3 weeks ago, or Ryan, a fellow peer that I trained with, who died on Thanksgiving. Overdoses have skyrocketed, and I'm confused because the Premier and the Health Minister told us that nobody would die as a result of the changes that they made, the closures that they did. I wish someone had told that to Fabio and Ryan. It's heartbreaking, really, and there's more to come. Which brings us to Bill 33. Amazing, I got there, finally. We've got a bill that takes away some of the things that we know that are evidence-based, that are good for students and are good for a learning environment. Responsive representatives that are accessible to parents and the community. Bill 33 threatens to trample all that and take it all away at the minister's whim. We have school resource officers that boards are being mandated that they will be required to engage with school resource officers, which, let's call it what it is, those are police in the schools. And I can tell you as a formerly homeless person that there's a very slippery slope and a very quick drop between feeling protected and served and feeling policed and surveilled. It's a very disturbing experience, and as a cisgendered white male that I can make that distinction, I can imagine it's a far easier distinction for my racialized friends to make. And that is the thing that we're going to lose. We're going to lose responsive representation. We're going to lose a bit of our freedom in our schools. And that's a scary thing, because when we lose those things, we lose a little bit of what it means to be ourselves, of what it means to be in a community. And all of these things have happened because people spoke out, but they didn't speak out loudly enough with a great enough volume, and not enough people spoke out about these things. And with a guy like the one in the Premier's chair right now, the only thing that they really understand is when you say, that's enough, I won't let you do this anymore. You know, that's enough, sir. If you're in our other official language, c'est suffit. Or if you're in North America, ya basta. And if we don't start standing up and not allowing this guy to take stuff away from us, because he's got his peg for patsies and he can take pretty much anything he wants and hand it over to his the guys who he's not in the back pocket of. And so just get out there and tell your friends and tell your neighbors and tell everybody that you know that until we say that's enough, you can't take any more from us, we're not going to let you. He's going to keep on trying to take and take and take. And until he understands that there's a price to be paid, we're going to keep on getting stuff took. So let's not get anything took anymore. Let's get out there and stop him now. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Connected. Last but not least, our next speaker, gender pronoun she, her, in 2015 was struck by the driver of a 5,000-pound SUV while riding her bike to work. The driver inflicted a broken spine, traumatic brain injury, and extensive soft tissue damage that later caused life-threatening blood clot complications. This violence was not only the result of one reprehensible motorist, but systemic disinvestment in the public realm. The refusal to equitably design our streets for safety instead of speed. She is the spokesperson for Friends and Families for Safe Streets, which is made up of people whose loved ones were struck and killed by motorists, and people who have survived being struck with severe, life-altering injuries. Jess?
So much for being here, and thank you for sticking around. My name is Jessica Speaker. I'm with Friends and Families for Safe Streets, and as Andrea said, I was struck and almost killed riding my bike to work in 2015. My spine was broken. I had a moderate traumatic brain injury that I still have to live with every day. I live in chronic pain, and I nearly died a second time when a huge blood clot formed on my leg, went through my heart, and obstructed the blood passages on both sides of my lungs. That was the worst thing that has ever happened to me, and it blew up my future and what I was trying to build for myself. And as bad as it is nothing in the face of what my friends and colleagues in this group have endured when their loved one was struck and killed by a motorist. I want to make it really clear that speed kills with what's been happening lately with the speed camera program. When someone is struck at 30 kilometers an hour, they have a 90% chance of surviving being hit. When somebody is hit at 50 kilometers an hour, they have an 85% chance of dying. And above that, once you get to 60, death is virtually assured. And that's why speed matters so much. And that's why we're fighting to save the speed camera program. What happens when a loved one is killed is you have a police officer knocking on your door with maybe a paper bag of your loved one's possessions and delivering the news to you that breaks your life and your heart into uncountable pieces. You then have to go to the hospital and identify your loved one's remains in whatever horrifically injured state they're in. You get back your loved one's bloodied clothing and have to figure out what to do with it. Like, think about that for a second. What would you do with it? Like, do you wash it? Do you put it in the basement? Do you throw it out? What do you do? My friends live with empty bedrooms in their homes, empty seats around their tables, all of those spaces silently screaming at them that their loved one is gone forever. But all of this death and all of this violence is completely preventable. We've banded together what's left of us to fight for change, to make sure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else ever again. And especially, we are beyond disturbed at the thought of what happened to us being inflicted on children on their way to school in school zones. To have a premier in a seat of power in this province who is knowingly, intentionally taking away a safety measure in school zones and replacing it with one that doesn't work, which is signs and flashing lights, which we already have and already don't work, that is going to get somebody killed. That might get a child killed, or several. Something that's really stuck with me once I started doing this advocacy work in about 2018 was there was a young boy named Duncan Shue who was killed in front of his school. He left a crosswalk, crossed the street on his way home, and an adult in a minivan who was speeding hit him and killed him right in front of his school. A speed camera could have slowed that driver down, so they might have been looking, they might not have hit him at all, or he might have been able to survive. But instead of doing anything about speeding, any single thing, what happened was that crosswalk beside the school was shut down. So the kids were punished, made it harder to get to school instead of making it harder for adults to speed in front of that school and put kids' lives in danger. So this attack on road safety that's happening right now is jaw-droppingly reckless, it's not based in any kind of evidence, and is grossly negligent. Our speed safety camera program is very effective at slowing drivers down, especially the very worst speeders. They're the ones that slow down the most. The supposed alternatives that Doug Ford has mentioned, like speed bumps and roundabouts, I just also want to make it very clear, those are not going to happen. Where the speed cameras are, they're on main roads. Municipalities do not put speed bumps on those because of the need for emergency responders to drive on them. And anywhere there's a bus route, buses do not like to drive on them. Roundabouts are going to get into an unbelievably expensive and drawn-out legal process of land expropriation because you can't build one where there's a four-way intersection because they're bigger. So you have to take land all around the corners to build that. It'll never happen. So all of those things, like it's true that roundabouts and speed bumps do slow drivers down, but they're not a substitute for speed safety cameras. And so what our fight for road safety and what your fight for investment in policing free schools have in common is at its core real safety for our community members and our kids. Real measures that are based in evidence that actually work. But that's not what this government is about. Doug Ford has made it perfectly clear. He does not care about real safety for people in this province. His government is mandating policing in schools when research is clear, student voices are clear, that creates harm. At the same time, he's banning speed cameras, which is the exact same thing. It doesn't work and it does harm. All these government decisions are not protecting children's best interests. They're not protecting students, they're not protecting our communities. They both ultimately lead to grave harm and in some cases, predictable, preventable death. So our interconnected fight, we're all connected. People who use drugs, schools, nursing, it's all the same fight against a government that fundamentally does not care about people who aren't rich and people who aren't cronies. And what they're telling us is that our safety, our health, our lives don't matter to them. But we matter. We do matter. And there's more of us than there are of them. Power to the people, not the people in power. Thank you.
Woo! Stay and connect and learn ways to get involved. Check out our learning booth. Again, sign our 2 provincial campaign paper petitions. Christine Wong Tam with the NDP has retabled both petitions with new signatures. Former MVP had tabled them last year. Check out our calls to action. You're able to find them on our website, policingfreeschools.ca, by clicking on the Ontario Take Action Now tab. And if you haven't already, please make sure to pick up a Know Your Rights Police in Schools pocketbook at our booth. It was intentionally created as a national resource guide and is provided by one of our national campaign partners, the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association, who have a national mandate to preserve, defend, maintain, and extend civil liberties and human rights across so-called Canada. Information in the pocketbook applies across the country, including right here in Ontario. Read the solidarity statements as well that have been provided by our international organizational partners. They can be found also at the learning booth. International partners are in solidarity with us, opposing Bill 33, including those across the United States, the United Kingdom, and South Africa, and also solidarity statement from our supporters, scholars and advocates based in Australia and New Zealand. And grab a lush gift set, a community donation, as there is a limited supply. And so we collectively, in ending today's teaching and rally, send a clear message from across the province to the Ford government. No to Bill 33, no to power grabs, no to taking over school boards, no to the elimination of democratically elected school board trustees, no to privatization, no to policing in schools, and yes to properly funded, supported, resourced public education. Thank you to all of the speakers and the media who participated, and thank you to all of you who've joined us today in solidarity, and let us continue to mobilize, organize against Bill 33, and be in solidarity with each other, because our struggles are interconnected. And let us demand the government fund our schools, fund our communities, not policing in schools. Sending thank yous as well to the Peel Elementary Teachers Local for providing support to be able to complete the provincial tour local campaign stops across the province. Thank you to the OSSTF York Region for providing today's beverages and snacks. Thank you to the Ontario Federation of Labour for your usable handheld posters across all our campaign stops and campaign tour. Thank you to Lush for the community donated gift sets. Thank you to British Columbia Civil Liberties Association for the Police and Schools pocketbooks. And thank you to all our partners across the province and across the country. Closing us off will be DJ Curate, who's the music curator of the provincial campaign for Policing Free Schools Ontario and our provincial campaign tour, who will continue to be on the ones and twos. Today's Policing Free Schools provincial campaign tour finale, teaching and rally at Queen's Park on the first day that the provincial legislature resumed, has concluded. And stay tuned for more actions.